All right, welcome in. We appreciate you hanging with us here on this Saturday evening edition of the Deeper Dive. We'll get you ready for 6 games on the slate. Myself, more importantly, Terry's in the house. Tyler is producing. You see right there, we have all 6 games to get through before lock when Greg and Matt come your way. So for the next 2 hours, we have you covered. We'll do our best to answer each and every question you have there on the chat. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, please, if you haven't already, and you're subscribed. We have 2 other channels as well. Our season-long fantasy and, of course, our odds channel. Tons of content throughout, Terry. As always, my friend, can't wait to dive down a rabbit hole at some point with you, as always.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we got a good slate to talk about. We were talking about some TV and some streaming before the show. So all kinds of stuff to dive into here. But I think this is a particularly interesting DFS slate, just the way that it shaped 6 games, a few really solid stars, a few already, kind of standout value spots. So I like this slate. I think it's going to be an interesting one to tackle.
6. Where is that on your level of preference when you're attacking it? Would you much rather go 4 or 12, somewhere in that range, or 6, a good sweet spot for you?
Yeah, I really like the 6, 7, 8, like somewhere in that range. I'm pretty good with. I like those. Those tend to be my most successful slates. There's enough that you can get different, enough that you can shape lineups in different ways while not sacrificing a lot of points, a lot of upside, and all these things that we care about. Where you get down to 3-4, you're really doing that when you're trying to differentiate. It really limits the field, and there's enough options for upside, and there's enough clear value. Like, we do still want to get to some of that good chalk, and you get that on this type of slate as well. So I really like this size and shape of a slate.
All right, so here's the thing, because we are going to go game by game as we do in the deeper dive and go through everything here with each and every game with value as well. But I am curious, and maybe it's later on in the slate, and it's a good idea to keep using it, especially for reference if there is that game, if it's the Heat, Spurs, maybe even that Sixers-Warriors game. Is there one game on this 6-game slate that you're targeting more so than others?
I mean, there are pieces all over the board, but I think you're getting a ton of value plays that rank out similarly from that Houston-Memphis game and from that Chicago-Miami game. So we've got a lot to work with there in terms of like $3,000 and $4,000 guys on DK, $4,000 guys into the 5,000s on FanDuel, depending on where your action is and which guys you're focused on. You can get to a very similar lineup constructions rotating through these different value pieces and just kind of focusing on, all right, this guy's under-owned over here, this guy's under-owned over there. I can put my lineups together with similar type guys and do it a little bit differently, or rotate guys through positions, play some guys together. There's a lot to do with both of those games. So those are the ones, if you sort by optimal lineup appearances outside of some of the stars, those are really the spots where we're getting a lot of these value plays from. So it's about those for the value. And then we've got some stars from the various points. Like Nikola Jokic is one of my favorite plays of the day, but everybody wants to roster Nikola Jokic if you've got a spare 11 grand in your salary cap to do it. So It's not really interesting to call that out.
Fair enough. All right, let's start with the Jazz and Wizards here in Washington, and we'll start with Utah first. Couple of guys to target right there at the top as far as what we have on site. High projected in Gobert and Mitchell. Just curious how you have them compared to ownership so far in the field.
Yeah, they're both kind of mix-in type options to me. I do like the price on Mitchell on FanDuel at 8,300. I think that's a lot better, obviously, especially with multi-position, than where we're getting him on DK at 9,000. Looking at our most recent boom bust board, and I'm sure we'll get an update to that sometime during the show with some news that's come out. But we had him, Donovan Mitchell, and I expect it to be around the same at 20% optimal on the FanDuel slate. So that puts him in range. That makes him an interesting movable piece at 8,300. Underpriced over there. On the DK slate, that gets cut in half. He's only 10% optimal over there and getting owned a little bit more than that. Gobert would be the other interesting guy on this team for me. He's getting efficiently owned on both sites. He's priced appropriately for his production. We saw a really nice game from 48.7 FanDuel points the last time out in a 29-minute outing. So it's a short outing for him. We've got him projected for 32.5, which is right on his average for the season, right on his average over the last 3. He's averaged 1.3 fantasy points per minute over the last 3 games, 1.3 for the season. So he's been right on production. I don't expect like a massive outlier from Rudy Gobert, but he's capable of producing one. 13% boom score probability on DK, 11% on FanDuel. He's fine, but there are center options that I like better, and he's one of the center only guys on the board. So it just knocks him down a little bit on my list here.
For us, there really isn't much difference that we have for anybody else really on Utah, especially when looking at the possibility of finishing in optimal lineups, for at least for DK, for Bogdanovich, O'Neal, and Conley. They're all pretty much right there similar. Does anybody jump out specifically, or are you pretty much looking at them in that similar group?
Yeah, they all just fall into somewhat uninteresting single-digit optimal lineup rates, single-digit boom score probabilities. Every one of these guys in a vacuum could put up a nice night on any given slate. The prices aren't wrong. Like, these guys are priced pretty appropriately, pretty efficiently in the, let's call it, low 4s to 6s, with Mike Conley at 6'2" on FanDuel as a point guard, 5'9" on DK. He's probably the most interesting piece, the guy who could most reasonably give you more than 30 fantasy points out of this group. We know that Clarkson could get there if he sees a little bit more than his 23 minutes that we've got him projected for. Royce, we've got it a 30.7 minute projection and really not doing a ton with it. 28 minutes last time out. He had a 16.3 fantasy point night. Over the last 3, he's averaging 0.79 fantasy points per minute. For the season, 0.75. There's just not a lot there with Royce O'Neal right now. So he's fine for a few shares here and there, but he's probably my least favorite out of that group. But you can definitely mix and match your way through and play some shares of these guys. If you're around the field, slightly above, slightly under, I wouldn't judge it any direction.
Nobody else really to get to then. If you're struggling at that point, I can't imagine that there is a punt option that we missed here.
No, nobody leaps to mind. I mean, if you wanted to roster a few shares of Hassan Whiteside and hunt for that, he put up 32 and a half FanDuel points in 15 minutes his last time out. He's averaging 15.3 for the season. So that's over his last 3, and that was just that last game. That's a 2.16 fantasy point per minute rate. If he was that player every day, he'd be the best player in the NBA. He's not that guy every day. You're hunting for a very outlier type of a game. We've got him projected for a 13.6 minute night. I don't think he gets there. But that would be the one like total dart throw tournament play at 4.1 on FanDuel, 3.2 on DK that I wouldn't begrudge anybody. 8.4% boom score probability. Know what you're doing when you roster it. Don't put it into too many lineups if you do it.
What's the best movie that's ever been filmed in Utah, you think?
Filmed in Utah? Oh, boy. What about SLC Punk? I assume that was filmed in Utah. You ever see it?
How the hell did you pull that right there? Holy shit, man.
Who doesn't love a little Matthew Lillard action? I mean, come on. That scream.
Barely finished.
I can't think of another Matthew Lillard movie.
And you nailed that. Like that's really impressive. Yeah, Thelma and Louise apparently was in there too.
Okay, that's a good one. I got lucky honestly, and thought, all right, Salt Lake City. Oh, SLC Punk. All right, so that was an easy connection.
Unbelievable.
I'm struggling to think of anything else, but there's probably some. I mean,
okay, so
that's where Redford's out at with his where Sundance is. That's in Utah.
Yeah,
so
I guess
with Redford out there and his whole Sundance Ranch and Sundance Film Festival, like somebody's shooting out there.
The Sandlot apparently in Utah from Tyler.
Really? That's your winner. That's your runaway winner if that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess the criteria is it has to be more than like a scene. For example, that scene in Dumb and Dumber where he says goodbye to Holly, right? Lauren Holly. Right. That scene was in Utah in the airport, but nothing else. That's all. So
yeah, no, like with travel, if you're just doing something in the airport and stopping by, that doesn't count for me.
That doesn't count at all. All right, so let's flip to Washington here. And now a little different. We talked about Mitchell Gobert there at the top a little bit with the other guys. What about Beal really standing out more so as far as a cost option?
Yeah, I mean, Beal's interesting, right? He's a guy putting up 1.03 fantasy points per minute for the season on 30.1% usage. Last year, he was a 1.26 fantasy point per minute producer. 52.4% true shooting is probably lagging behind. I don't have his rate from last year, but I assume that's lagging behind where he was at last year, just in terms of his shooting acumen. Over the last 3.879 fantasy points per minute and averaging 39 minutes a night. So he's getting significant run. It's just a little concerning with Bradley Beal of where the production's been, but as a pure play, 8.4 on FanDuel and 8.5 on DK. Point guard and shooting guard eligible on DK gives him a little bit of extra bump there for me. Shooting guard only on FanDuel. I'll take shares of him, but he's efficiently owned. So it's not a standout play. In terms of raw point projection, it's fine. You can book that. You can get over the field if you want to, just on raw points. If you think that Beal gets a couple extra minutes, makes a couple additional shots than what we've been seeing, he could easily crack that 37.1 projection that we've got for him on the FanDuel slate. He's at 38.7 on the DK slate with the different scoring. So it's something you could easily see him coast over 40 fantasy points and be a relevant play today. He just doesn't pop for where he's at, even at the low pricing.
All right. So below Beal, is there anybody else we can take advantage of here? You know, Harrell pops up a lot when we look at optimal lineups, especially on DK.
Yeah, Harrell's the guy that kind of pops to the top of the board. We've got him projected for a 26.2 minute night right now with Kuzma out, and Kuzma went on the health and safety protocols, as did like everybody in the league at some point in the last week or so. But in 330 minutes this year without Kuzma, Trez jumps to a 1.46 fantasy point per minute rate. That's a monster. Beal also, it's worth noting, jumps to a 1.10. So, or actually, no, I'm sorry, he slides to a 1.10. Do I have that? No, jumps to a 1.10.
Jumps to, yeah.
Harold, yeah, I'm getting my Harold and Beal lines confused here. So
all good,
Harold jumps from 1.16 all the way up to that 1.4 mark. So he becomes very interesting. Even with just a 26.2 minute projection, we're getting him 30% optimal on FanDuel, 20% on DK, positively leveraged as of the last update on both. I expect the ownership will climb a little bit as other sites and our shows and everything talk about him, but I think he's a strong play. You do risk those clunker games like last time out, 18 minutes, 5.4 FanDuel points. Not very good. Averaging 0.838 over the last 3 and 24.3 minutes a night. So you are risking a little bit of a potential for a clunker there, but we've got him projected for a 30-point night on FanDuel in the median. Center and power forward eligible on the FanDuel slate makes him super interesting. Center only, still very interesting on DK.
All right, so we'll keep it moving here. And a reminder, a lot of people popping in here. Hit that thumbs up, please, if you haven't already. It's huge for us. We don't ask much, obviously, in return. That, make sure you're subscribed as well. And a couple of great suggestions. Say people on the chat responding to those movies in Utah. Lake Tahoe, a big spot here as well. Look, Prize Picks sponsoring today. So we have some really cool things going on with Prize Picks. You see the shows, the content that we provide from video on demand to actual live shows with Prize Picks. You see how easy it is to go over or under based on our own projections. So sign up if you haven't. You're going to get a deposit match up to $100, which is insane. And you're also going to get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So if anything, it's a way to get that right there. Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that big time. So let's move on. Anybody, I think we covered Washington, unless there was anybody else that we missed. I think you got it, though, my friend, right?
Yeah, for the most part, a lot of mix and match type pieces. Gafford could see, a decent game. He put up 39 FanDuel points in 27 minutes the last time out, but we don't have him projected near that, where you got him at a 20-minute projection. Dinwiddie for 5.5 on both sites. Getting a little bit of optimal lineup there, getting a little bit of boom score probability there. I don't hate that one. Projected around 27 fantasy points, around 30 on the DK slate. So you could definitely see Dinwiddie jump into the 30 and change kind of fantasy point range, but I would expect him to come in more around his median projection than have like a monster ceiling game. So they're mix and match type guys for me. Maybe Dinwiddie a little bit more than that, but not much to get excited about.
So before we hit Cleveland, I'm curious with Sacramento. You have the pay up option clearly with Fox. Are you looking at anybody else, especially with the Kings dealing with Holmes being out, maybe some mid-range guys that you can get to if it's Barnes or Halliburton?
Yeah, I tell you what, I just dropped a new update in here. Let me just resort this column so I can look at them all lined up together.
That's fine. We're going to get to the best movie out of Sacramento, so keep your brain moving on that one too.
Fair enough. So a guy that I wrote up in my optimal lineups column today, and he still looks pretty good on the board right now, Tyreese Halliburton. I think he's not underpriced on the FanDuel slate, but his FanDuel price is probably pretty fair. He's at 7.3, 7,300 on the FanDuel slate. On DK, he's at 5,800. Point guard and shooting guard eligible. That makes me interested in him over there. Coming up in like 20% of the optimal lineups, not getting owned to that clip. Gives him a nice little leverage score on the site, 26% boom score probability on a 31.6 median projection. I'm not sure what else the field's looking for in a play. I kind of like that one, and I'm willing to play him at the higher salary on the FanDuel slate. I think he's getting slept on over there. It's a similar story, just at lower numbers, 12.5% optimal, 7.3% owned. Anytime I can get to a player like him under 10% ownership at what I think is still a fair price, even if it's not a bargain, I'm happy to go there. We just saw him put up 36.9 fantasy points in 36 minutes the last time out. Over the last 3, he's been producing at a 1.12 fantasy point per minute rate in 37 minutes a night. That's up from the 0.93 he's given us through the season. I think there's definitely reason to believe in Tyreese Halliburton, and I'm happy to try and get there before the field does. So that's a play I'm interested in. Fox is efficiently owned, efficiently salaried. I think he's fine. I think he is who he is. We can definitely see the upside game, 50.9 the last time out in 34 minutes. He absolutely has that capability again in this matchup. It's just not a standout play. He is kind of just an is what he is kind of play for me.
Terrence Davis catching some ownership here. I don't think it's enough, especially on the 6-game slate as a deterrent, just over 20%. I think more importantly is how we have him at a 15% land, at least on DK here. Great cheap option, it looks like, at 3,700.
Yeah, and he's a guy that has forward eligibility at the small forward spot on the site, in addition to his shooting guard eligibility. And a lot of the other guards that we were talking about before from some of those other games at the top of the show were shooting guard, point guard. So you do get a value play that mixes into the forward roles here. 33.7, 3,700 is just, it's too low for what this guy's done lately. 40.1 fantasy FanDuel points in 22 minutes the last time out. He's been averaging over the last 3 games 1.26. 0.96 for the season. So he's had a nice uptick, 26.7 minutes a night over the last 3, seeing 17.3 for the season. So, I mean, with the expanded role, we've got him projected for 24.5 minutes. That price is just too low for the potential per minute production. FanDuel's got it right at 5,700. He's fine to throw into a few lineups over there, but not one I would expect to have a massive upside at that salary.
Anybody else you want to clean up here with the Kings before we keep it moving?
I mean, it's at least worth saying the name Marvin Bagley, just, with Holmes out, 22.7 minute projection, not projected to do a lot in our numbers, but people do like to talk about him, like to get to him. He's only 3,700. Could he get there? Absolutely. 33 fantasy points in 27 minutes in the last time out. He could get there. I like other power forwards and centers better on FanDuel. I like other power forwards better on DK.
Ladybird, Pink Cadillac, Misery, Almost Famous, Frankie and Johnny. These are popping up in Sacramento, man.
I do like Almost Famous quite a bit. Misery's, solid all movie as well. Right, all-time performance.
Donner Pass and I-80 in Placer County.
Donner,
Life. Do you remember that movie Life? Parts were shot in West Sacramento.
Okay, yeah, that popped up in my you might like this on Netflix just like this last week, Life, with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think
I watched that at some point in the last year, like pandemic times. I would definitely watch that at like 4:00 in the morning. It's a funny movie. It's underrated, actually.
Right. I think so. Yeah, absolutely. All right. I didn't know if there was anybody else. I did see one there in the chat. Yeah, Almost Famous is definitely the best there by all means. Yeah,
solid.
Yeah, Tyler, if you can just help on the banning here, I'm going to do it myself as well. Oh, there we go. So here's the thing.
I want to know what they said. I wasn't looking at the chat.
Oh, you can go back and look. I think I'm just doing the messages and not the actual thing. Right. All right. So yeah, he's mad because he lost a lot of money, I'm sure. That usually happens.
That tends to be
it. Sorry, Frank. We got him. All right. Let's move to the Cavs. We have a little bit more flexibility here at the top, especially based off of ownership. Mobley's coming right up there, but Garland as well, little higher priced option. And then, of course, Jared Allen is always going to be up there at the top. But we have those 3 guys that are not necessarily cheap to even mid-range options. These are more depending on the position that you're looking at each of these guys. Do you find yourself, and they're more the heavier owned guys on this slate, granted only 6 games. I get it, Terry, but do you find yourself heavy to the field on those 3?
Yeah, so I was just pulling up I ran a bunch of crunches before we started the show, and I noticed Ricky Rubio was coming up 18%. These are just dashing off the optimal. So Rubio was coming up 18% on the DK, and Mobley was coming up a significant amount. I'm just looking for, there he is, 49.1% of 460, quote unquote optimal, no randomness, no uniques forced, or excuse me, 1 unique forced. Otherwise, it would be the same lineup 490 times. But Mobley and Rubio were coming up quite a bit there. 5.2 for Rubio on DK, probably a little bit low considering his potential upside, but he's also a guy who can come out and just be flat and totally disappoint. 23 minutes the last time out, 19.8 FanDuel points, 1.03 fantasy points per minute, and 24.7 minutes per night over the last 3, though. So the production's certainly there at 5,200. You can get to some Rubio shares on DK. He's efficiently owned, doesn't stand out, but he's fine. I don't have any issues with rostering him over there. 59 on FanDuel. It's also okay. It's not a standout spot. I like some of his teammates better. I like Garland a little bit better, even though you're paying up for him at 7,600. I think this team is more, I'm going to be focused on just drawing some shares of the big men, though. Mobley, I mentioned off the top, stands out as the best potential option out of the guys who are here right now. We got a ping from the news god there. We'll check that out in a minute. But Mobley, especially with center and power forward eligibility on both sites, he's cheap. The per minute production is there, 1.03 for the season, 1.14 for the last 3. Jared Allen, I'm totally happy to get to 45 fantasy point performance in 27 minutes last time out. Kevin Love had a standout performance minutes the last time out in 23 minutes, 43.6 fantasy points, 1.34 and 20.7 over the last 3 games. So there's some value in just mix and match type shares of all of these different big men. They're all efficiently owned. They're all priced around where they should be. So I'd kind of just be rotating through shares of these guys. I wouldn't scramble to take any of them out of my lineups. I don't know how much I'd scramble to put any of them into lineups. If I was looking to get if gun to my head, I had to roster one, it would probably just be Mobley in a power forward spot.
Yeah, but you mentioned Love real quick. 4,400. He might be just a cheap pivot option, especially moving around depending on how you have that position at the slate, especially being able to work him at the 4 or 5.
Sure. And it's not one to, necessarily sneeze at. 1.17 fantasy points per minute over the course of the season, 57.1% true shooting, 16% assist share, 16% rebounding. Kevin Love, he's still doing Kevin Love things out on the court, and it's just kind of limited time. So if we see him for, a couple additional minutes, we've got him projected at 20.8. If he sees 24, 25, he could easily crack through that 4,400. I changed my salaries to decimal, and I'm still getting used to it. That 4,400 salary here. I put a bunch of new stuff on my board, so I needed this space. So I think there's room there. He's under-owned by a little bit in terms of our leverage score. It probably comes out at efficient ownership. You're not going to surprise anybody. He's fine as a dart throw, though, in tournaments.
All right, brother. We'll move on. Houston, Memphis here. I will say, though, Major League has to be right up there at the top. Ooh. Are we missing something? Like the Drew Carey show doesn't count as far as being filmed in Cleveland, right? It has to be Major League and then everybody else racing for second place.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a movie that I've got in, let's call it the top.
It's right behind you, overall. I'm sure, somewhere.
Yeah, if it's not back there, it's out there because I watched it recently. But I mean, that's a tippy top movie filmed anywhere. So yeah, for whichever of these cities you're talking about, that's definitely on the list. Was it in Memphis or Houston?
What's that?
Major League.
No, Cleveland.
Oh, Cleveland. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, because we just left Cleveland. Yeah.
Well,
they filmed that in
your
Baltimore?
Transition was let's go to Houston, Memphis. I was thinking ahead following the transition, and I'm obviously just really stupid. And Cleveland, of course.
All right. Well, look, we're seeing that it was.
Although technically, actually, wait a minute. Wasn't it filmed in Chicago? Wasn't it filmed in the old Chicago stadium?
So, no, I'm hearing Chicago.
I think it was filmed in Chicago. I think it was the
Baltimore, one of the two. All right, so that's
was filmed. We're all wrong. It was filmed in Milwaukee.
See, there you go. You're stuck with movies like Draft Day and My Friend Dahmer. So there you have it. Cleveland is just as we expected.
Sports movie.
Exactly right. Antoine Fisher was filmed there as well. All right, we can't.
I want my draft picks back.
Draft. Look, Craig Ardenwood says don't sleep on Draftwood. All right. I apologize for getting that wrong on Major League. All right, let's keep it moving here.
Now, I had to redeem myself.
Yes, thank you. Now we're in Memphis. All right, so Houston, Memphis. We'll start with Houston here. We'll still deal with the factor. A lot of guys still out. Mainly John Morant is the big one on Memphis' side, but maybe we could take advantage of that. You still have the center matchup here. So with right now, at least Christian Wood. We'll start with Houston. Are you getting the much of Wood at that 9,500 tag on DK, spending up across the board for Wood?
Now, I don't think he really pops as a spend up option. He's projected for around 5% ownership. If I got him in 10% of my lineups, it's not something I would scramble to change as long as they were projected out well and optimal and all of that. He's a potentially interesting leverage point. I just think that's kind of high on the price tag. 1.15 fantasy points per minute for the season. He's produced. It's not that, but it just, for this slate, that seems a little bit high, particularly with only center eligibility. I'm a little bit more interested in him for 8,300 on the FanDuel slate with power forward and center eligibility, but so is the field. The field's projected for 21% ownership as of the last update. 16.5% optimal, puts him at negative leverage. You can ride that negative leverage. You don't have to kill it and dramatically undercut the field. If you're at or around the field, you're fine. If you go a little bit over, say, a quarter of your lineups or a little bit more, particularly with the ability to flex them around the board, I don't mind that. I think that's fine, and you can get different in enough other spots. That said, he's not a standout play. I think it's a fair price. I do like the positional flexibility, but he doesn't really like vault to the top of the board in any of our metrics. 12% optimal, 16.5 on the optimal lineup rate. I like some of the role players here better. We don't have, not Alexa. I said I like. Jeez, she's over there.
Yeah,
She's
man.
Respond to me now.
Nonstop. You got to unplug that thing for anything live. I'm telling you.
Seriously, you're not kidding. We're watching TV these days. It's really starting to get obnoxious with how much it reacts to. It's probably recording all.
Does it respond to Armani Brooks? Does that set it off when you say that or something like that, or is it just?
I think it's just my propensity to just, ramble and slur all these words together as I'm trying to get all this out. But Armani Brooks, definitely interesting on both sites. 44 on FanDuel, 4.0 on DK. Point guard and shooting guard eligible over there. Shooting guard only on FanDuel. Comes up around 20% optimal on both sites. He's negatively leveraged on both sites, but it's a good enough value play where I think you can just kind of bake it in. And again, not so much sweat that negative leverage because you do have a lot of positively leveraged, interesting plays and points of upside where you can chase those ceiling scores tonight. So he's more of a foundational piece. That said, there are a lot of these guys to rotate through tonight. So you can spend, an additional 4 and go to like a Garrison Matthews if you wanted, and you drop from 20.8% optimal to 12.5, but you claw back 12 percentage points in the ownership. So you can play some of those salary games from site to site tonight and from lineup to lineup tonight. And particularly these two teams have some interesting pieces that just kind of mix and match in interesting ways like that together. So I think it's an interesting spot. It's definitely one I'm somewhat interested in, and it extends down to about that Garrison Matthews level, and then it just kind of tapers off. I'm not getting to like much of the Daniel Dices or DJ Augustins of the world. It looks like we've got a interesting, and maybe he's just not coming up. We do have decent marks on Kayla Martin Jr. It looks like as of the last update here. Only half of it is populated on my sheet though, so I would have to dig into that. We've got him at say again.
11.8% ownership, I see.
Yeah, the ownership and the optimal is what's not populating here, but we've got him projected out at 24.6 minutes, which makes him very interesting at 3.8K on FanDuel and at 3.1 on DK. Power forward and center eligible over there. We do have a lot of pieces to rotate through, but that's another significant value. He's coming up 30% boom score probability with a 20.8 point median projection. At that median projection, he doesn't really have to do a lot other than not trip over the sideline to make value for that price. So I don't hate that. Definitely a rotating piece. I'll see if I can get him to update with the rest of the information here as we talk.
All right, let's look at Memphis here. And a reminder, you just pop it in, definitely hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed, of course, but really thumbs up upon arrival. If you have something better than, and there aren't many, I think, to look at for Memphis, we'll take all suggestions here. Best movie shot filmed, not just a scene, but just shot filmed in Memphis. No Morant, and our ownership projections are reflecting that clearly as two of the top, 5-6 guys we have, with Dillon Brooks right there at the top, projected just 36.5%. And also sliding in there, cheaper option is Kyle Anderson in this game, just over 0.25% of the field owning Anderson tonight. How do you look at yourself when you build versus the field for these two guys to start?
I mean, anytime I'm putting Kyle Anderson in my lineups, especially when he's chalky, I look at myself and kind of shake my head and wonder what I'm doing. But I think it's warranted here. Maybe we undercut the field at a negative 20.9 leverage score on FanDuel, although this may be lacking an update in the ownership and optimals. On DK, I think it's a little bit more interesting. He's negatively leveraged over there, but only 24.3% ownership as compared to 46.4 in the last update for FanDuel. He's just cheap on the FanDuel slate, so he makes things work. He's small forward and power forward eligible. I get it, but I don't love it. He's just a guy who's let us down so many times over the course of his career. That said, 0.98 fantasy points per minute on just 16.3% usage for the season, 16.9% assist share, 11.5% rebounds over the last 3. He's only been back. He played 15 minutes in the last one, put up a 23.8 minute night. So it's not great, but yeah, I think he's kind of a mandatory piece when you're getting him at that big an optimal rate. I just would probably consider an undercut, just given the value pieces that we have to move around the board. Dillon Brooks, very interesting as well for similar reasons. I like the 6.1 salary on FanDuel, 6,000 on DK is perfectly fine. We're getting him a little bit tighter ownership to where he's coming up optimal, 38% optimal. I like the scoring upside. We've got him projected for a 33-point minute night on FanDuel at 31 minutes. So I think that's around where we should expect him. He was ruled out originally and then ended up up back in the rotation. He was out, I think, when the safety and protocols for the last game, and then was supposed to be out today, but then dropped back into our lives. So he's at the top of the board here, and wouldn't begrudge anybody any shares. Just watch the ownership because it's approaching 50% on FanDuel, 35% on DK.
All right, two things real quick. The lights are back flickering here, so you may have to kill about 2 minutes, but I'm hoping not. Here's the other thing, too. Steven Adams, 5,400 on DK. You know, he is decently rostered right now across the board. We talked about Harrell, though, also as a cheaper pivot. We do have some bigger names at the center position on the slate, so I don't know how much you're getting to Adams, if at all.
Yeah, not much. He comes up negatively leveraged on both sites. It's low raw ownership, right? We're only talking about 13.9 on DK, 11.3 is my last update on FanDuel. So, call it sub 15% ownership across the board. It's more the fact that we've got some standout star plays that we might want to make on both sites at the center only spot. And Adam suffers from being a center only guy. If he had power forward flexibility, he'd be a much better play on both sites. So it's just for opportunity cost that I kind of knock him down a few pegs at the center spot. I do really like the price. 5,400 I think is perfectly fair for a guy who puts up around a fantasy point per minute without needing much usage to do it. I like guys who can rack up points in counting stats. So I'd be fine with it outside of, I just want to get to some of these other guys.
I tell you, the one thing I love about doing anything here, if it's live before lock, deeper dive, or any type of content, is if we happen to throw something off the cuff out, we have so many different people who will come up with so many different suggestions. And it looks like we're down to a heavyweight battle between Walk the Line and Hustle and Flow to represent Memphis. Now, you've got the Firm, you've got a couple of other ones here, pretty strong rep by all means for Memphis. Great balls of fire. Like it's not something that should be overlooked, but you may have to break the tie here, Terry.
Man, those are pretty solid ones to consider.
Tyler's on Walk the Line. I'm on Hustle and Flow. We both have tons of support in the chat.
I mean, we're talking about, I'm not the biggest, formulaic biopic. I like a good biopic, but I like it to be a little bit different. That was a super formulaic one, but just based on the music, I'll go with Walk the Line there. I think that's the right choice.
All right. We'll get
based on the music exclusively.
Yeah.
And when you say Memphis movies, the one that springs to mind, but I doubt any scenes were filmed there, is Memphis Belle, the World War II movie about the guys who flew that last mission. That's a good movie.
I think there is enough Memphis in there to count. Just to be fair, Hustle and Flow is a music movie as well. Just
true. But I mean, we're talking about the Man in Black here. We're talking about Johnny Cash music. I mean,
I get it. Terrence Howard can't compete with Johnny Cash. I understand. I'm not trying to argue that by any means. All right, let's look. We'll get to South Beach in a second. Let's look at the Bulls here. And again, across the board, Jimmy Butler out, DeRozan out. So we'll deal with those two injuries. We're still dealing with no Bam here. So maybe that's a pathway to Vooch and maybe a good place to start. We still have Levine as far as one of the pay up options up there, but so is Vooch creeping up as well with a pretty high number.
Yeah, Vooch and Levine, both pretty interesting on this slate. I expect they're going to have massive minute shares. We've got Levine projected around 37 minutes right now. Vooch projected around 33. And actually, that's probably trailing another update that I have to make in here because we had Dosunmu was ruled out and Stanley Johnson was ruled out. We had him projected at 13 minutes. We had Dosunmu at 25. Let me see if I can pull that update while I'm talking through this. But I think just given with plenty to do on the slate, both of those star kind of guys are pretty interesting here. I think Lonzo Ball becomes pretty interesting. I think Troy Brown Jr. for his low price on DK becomes very interesting. 3,100 shooting guard and small forward eligible for Troy Brown. That's pretty significant. And we got Alex Caruso ruled into this lineup. So we've got to consider him and the impact that he's going to have here. All of those guys outside of Levine come up kind of as mix and match-ish type options with Vooch and Lonzo Ball up toward the top in terms of the optimal lineup rate on FanDuel, and with Troy Brown at his low price kind of hovering toward the top in the optimal lineup rate on DK. But it's Levine who stands at the top in terms of optimal lineup. But you're paying a price to get to him, 9,200 on FanDuel, 98 on DK. So you're cutting into your ceiling potential, you're cutting into your boom score probability pretty significantly on both of those, where some of the value guys have more to give you in that. So this is a spot where it kind of depends on what you need. Like if you're taking your value from the Houston-Memphis game, then you can afford to go to a Levine. You can go to a Vooch if you want to rotate him through some of those center shares, although he's another notch down from some of the centers we'll get to for me. I think it does make sense to get here and go to those guys. But if you play it the other way, you can play some of the values. You can go to a guy like Troy Brown and get aggressive about it. So it just depends on how you want to play the slate, I think. But I think there are both stars and value plays to draw from this game.
Too risky to get too much Caruso just coming off the injury and still playing through the hamstring?
I mean, I tell you what, we're talking about a 0.89 fantasy point per minute guy for the season, but given the idea that there's not anybody else in a Chicago uniform, like Luke Longley ain't walking through that door and coming out of retirement for these guys. So, everybody's on the floor is going to have something to do. I do think, though, speaking of Luke Longley, that it would be more inclined to go towards some of the bigs. Caruso, we've got projected at a 27.2 minute night. We just don't have a lot of big men on this team right now that are available tonight. So that gives Vooch another little goose. I would think if I was building for this team, I would be focusing more on the Vooch and Levine plays and less on the Carusos, Troy Browns, and Lonzos of the world. I just want to kind of get to the stars here and probably draw my value from the Houston-Memphis game.
You could see people already in the chat getting ready to offer up suggestions about stuff shot in South Beach. We got to get to players, of course. That's what everybody needs and wants here. So no Butler, no Bam, no shock there. Talked about Kyle Lowry kind of at the top here. Let's look at Lowry, 7,700 on DK. Not the best matchup by any means, but with everybody else out, dealing with trying to get to somebody here who's expected to take on some value. We also have Tyler Hero. That's right there. Similar projection, similar cost across the board.
Yeah, and both of those guys somewhat interesting. For me, it's Lowry. He was just running away with the point guard shares on the FanDuel slate at 6,700. At 7,700 on DK, I've got a little bit more hesitation, but I just think it's there for him. 40.9 FanDuel points per in the last game in 39 minutes. Over the last 3.93 fantasy points per minute. So it's right around his rate for the season. He was 0.92 for the season. On FanDuel, he's still underpriced for that rate at 6,700, and for this slate at the position, I think he's a little bit underpriced. The field's there. He's going to be in half of all lineups on the blue side, but he's coming up 36.2% optimal. He's kind of a foundational piece over there. You can get away from him. You can build with other point guards and undercut 50% ownership if you wanted to go 35-ish, somewhere around there. But I think he's going to be an interesting part of life on FanDuel tonight. He's definitely relevant there. On DK, a little bit less so. But I like that he's a little bit tighter into his between his optimal rate and his ownership projection. Only negative 1.5 leverage on the site. He's pretty interesting there. Hero definitely is interesting. We've gotten up and down performances from him for the season. 0.96 fantasy points per minute over the last 0.91. So it's actually declined with more to do over the last 3 minutes. 29.3 minute average over the last three, averaging 33.2 for the season. So played a little bit less. The 14.9 that he put up in 28 minutes in his last game, that's an outlier low. We can expect more from that. We can expect him to be around his median projection. So I'm fine with getting the $6,600 Hero. It's another guy who's priced up for the situation on the DK slate, though. 7,400. That's about right for him seeing an increased workload with the stars out. So I'm less interested there, but I do think he's still a relevant piece, and he's drawing positive leverage. Easy for me to say. Only 13.4% owned, 17.4% optimal on DK at both guard spots. So for that reason, he'd be interesting, but other things knock him down a little bit.
All right. Any other cheaper options you want to look at for Miami? Guys that are picking up ownership, a ton of steam for Kayla Martin. You also have PJ Tucker and, of course, Duncan Robinson, those two guys that are picking up some more on the bottom and cheaper options here.
Yeah, you want to talk about the guy who's really stepped up in the absence of these stars over the last few games. Kayla Martin leading the team at 1.04 fantasy points per minute over the last three. For the season, he's a 0.85 per minute producer, only on 15.7% usage. He's seen 31.3 minutes a game over the last three. He saw 34 in the last outing and had an absolute ceiling game. If this is his highest performance for the season, I wouldn't be surprised at 47.1 fantasy points. I would expect that we're going to get something in the range of a more reasonable standard deviation. Instead of like 3 standard deviations for him, it's probably going to be, 1.5 to the upside here. So expect if he goes over, it's going to be into that mid 30s kind of range. I don't expect we see him around 50, but I could be wrong. And with a 30-minute projection for these prices, 4,900 on FanDuel, he's still interesting to me, even with some negative leverage. I like that he's a multi-position between shooting guard and small forward, but really I'm burying the lead. 3,500 on DK. He should be in a lot of lineups over there. The leverage is actually improved. It's still at a negative 9.6, but with some of the other values that have opened, it's actually improved. So I like him even better than when I wrote him up this afternoon. I would have a massive share of Kayla Martin in the DK slate here.
Again, we brought this up earlier as far as a pivot at the 5. Any interest at all in Dedmon? A little cheaper, clearly, than the other two that we brought up. But again, if you're not paying up at the center spot, there may be even a better pivot than Dedmon here.
Yeah, he just falls into that same price range as some of the other guys that we've talked about. I think if I'm spending 55, 56 on a center on the FanDuel slate, it would probably lean toward Adams over Dedmon in this spot. We've only got him projected for a 21.8 median projection on FanDuel. Gave us a limited performance the last time out. Over the last 3, he's averaged 19.3 minutes, so right around where we've got him pegged, and only given us a 0.959, so called 0.96 fantasy point per minute rate. He hasn't been that 1.3, 1.27 per minute guy that we saw in certain roles last year, so he hasn't really stepped it up in this opportunity. So it's not really on the board for me on FanDuel. A little bit more interesting at 4,500 on DK. Like if you needed that money, I don't know where we're spending it or what we're doing with it because we're not really extracting value at center, but I could get behind it a little bit more at that rate on DK. It comes up 4.1% optimal with positive leverage.
All right, 2 games to go here. I see the poll. We have to get to that in a second. But look, a reminder, not only hit that thumbs up button. If you do, please make sure you're subscribed as well. But definitely when you pop in here, whatever question, comment, concern you have here for Terry, and it could be anything for Terry. He's here to answer anything on site or as far as what we have on slate tonight. Make sure you please hit that thumbs up button. Take advantage of what we have with Prize Picks. Look, click that link below, and we're going to match your first deposit up to $100. And oh, by the way, we're going to give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Now, Caddyshack has been ruled out due to technicality. I think a lot of that was shot in Fort Lauderdale. So that's out of there. It really came down to Scarface or Bad Boys. Pain and Gain was thrown in there by Tyler. I maintain that it should be something about Mary. So I'll throw it back to you, Terry, as far as Bad Boys, Something About Mary, or the iconic all-timer in Scarface.
I mean, those are some solid movies. Was Any Given Sunday also filmed in Miami? I would guess it is. The team's from Miami. I think it was filmed at Joe Robbie. That would be up there for me as well. It's difficult to get away. It's difficult to get away from Scarface, though. I mean, that's an all-timer. So yes. I think it's Scarface. That's okay. I might have it down a peg from where some other people rate it, but it's still an all-timer for me, and top 25-ish kind of a movie for sure. So it's got to go that way. But man, Miami's got some good ones. I mean, the Bad Boys franchise is fun. Yeah.
I saw somebody in the chat say how Miami is a cast member, like a character in Scarface. Like it's the city itself is so immersed in that movie. All right, just fair enough. And look, I'm going to say right now, all right, people, get all your suggestions out there. The only thing we ask is that you hit the thumbs up button, of course, but no Rocky. It ain't going to be Rocky, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4. I don't do the Rockies. I don't do the statue crap. None of that shit. We're going to get real movies. Although the first Rocky was a piece of art, everything else was a piece of shit, okay?
All right, I mean, I don't know if I'll go that. I agree very much with the first part of that statement.
No statue.
I still enjoy.
That's all I'm saying, Terry.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, 2 is kind of a continuation, not as good. It's like, hey, the second half of this 3.5-hour movie got a little bit worse, but 2 is still on the board for me. And then 4, as schlocky and 80s and USA rah rah rah, let's beat the commies as it is still a super fun movie. Let's not lie. I mean, come on, that you can't. If you turn on TBS and they're in the middle of him chopping wood in the montage scene, and you've got a half hour to go, you're sticking around for 4. Come on.
Yeah, look, all these people here who live thousands of miles away telling me I need to get fired or take off my sweatshirt because I love Rocky. Let me tell you something, all right? I speak for people that are born and raised. I speak for the blood and soul that is Philadelphia that does not want to be represented by some fake statue of Sylvester Stallone. I'll leave it at that. There's more important stuff.
What sucks is if you go to the art museum, the damn statue's not even at the top of the steps. It's down off in some corner at street level. Like, what the hell?
See, I hope Seth Curry breaks the record tonight just to shut up the people who are pro statue. All right. I'll take an L just for that. Look, 10 threes tonight for Curry, and he breaks the all-time record. He's done it 22 times in his career, Terry. He's at 11-6 on DK. What do you think?
Oh, I'm happy to get to him anytime. It's a hefty price to pay. And I do like Jokic a little bit more for similar money, But anytime Steph lands in my lineup, I'm very happy to see him there. You take the swings. I mean, last time out, 26.4 FanDuel points, a little bit better as a 30-point performance on DK. But we ain't paying for Steph for 30-point performances. But you take the good with the bad. Over the last three, 1.26 fantasy point per minute performer for the season, 1.38 on 30.1% usage. He's going to be gunning. He's going to be draining those threes. I absolutely love Steph Curry. I wish I could go back in time and rearrange that draft so that he was a Nick all this time, but I can't. So I'll just take him where I get him in DFS and be happy about it.
Okay. I love it, man. It's a great way to start by all means. And look, there is a little bit of a gap here. I don't know how excited you are on any given night to get to Andrew Wiggins, but as far as anybody else on this team, as far as Poole, maybe at 5,700, pretty decent pathway to get to the Sixers in that matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And he's an interesting guy. 31.4 minute projection on the night at 5,700 on the DK slate with eligibility at both guards, 6,500 on the FanDuel slate. He's coming up around 10% optimal on both sites. Positive to efficient ownership, positive leverage to efficient ownership on both sites. You squeeze a little bit more leverage, only 3.3% owned on FanDuel with a 9.5% optimal rate. So I like that spot. Gave us 37.6 FanDuel points in the last game in 35 minutes. Over the last 30 minutes a night, 1.01 per minute, up from 0.94 for the season. So definitely he's a firm guy from that like mid-range kind of a play. He's not necessarily a value. He's certainly not a star, but as a guy who just kind of plugs into the middle of a lineup build at multiple positions, absolutely you can get to Jordan Poole. I would consider Draymond a similar kind of an asset, although with power forward and center, they're just other guys who supersede him in terms of where I want to get to. And Andrew Wiggins is somebody I never like to roster. No. 0.94 for the season, 0.87 over the last three, gets 31.3 minutes a night over the last three. 30.4 over the course of the season. He just doesn't give us a lot. Nothing in the counting stats, 8.7% assist share, 6.9% rebounds, 59.2% true shooting is fine, but I don't know that he gets enough usage to deliver on it. Even at the price, he's nothing more to me than a mix-in mid-range option on FanDuel. And I don't know that I'd have a share of him at 6,100 on DK.
So Embiid clearly coming up as the most owned guy on the Sixers, 11-2. You deal with Jokic really as the only other pay-up option on the slate. So at 14.5% on DK and just across the board, how do you find yourself to the field with Embiid?
I really like Embiid here. I'm leaning Jokic, though. I think we've got the money to spend to make up the salary difference. I think it's worth doing. You're getting to the somewhat better point per minute producer. That said, over the last three, Embiid's got himself up to 1.60 from 1.47 for the course of the season. Last time out, 43.8 was not necessarily enough to deliver value at these lofty salaries, but we know Joel Embiid is capable of going out and putting up that 60 and change point night, that 70 point night. So I'm happy to take shares of him as well. 10-6 on the FanDuel slate is, a little bit interesting to me where he's coming in. That's a decent amount different than Jokic. So between the two, I expect those guys to be soaking up a lot of my center only shares on the FanDuel slate. Just divide it up between those guys and roster the other interesting centers at power forward where you can. Maybe you mix in a few shares of Vukovic, get them up to 10, 12%. But really for me, it's about Embiid and Jokic on this slate. So I really like the Embiid option. Not all that much ownership when we're talking about the raw ownership, 13% on both sites. I'm happy to get to Joel Embiid in any situation more aggressively than that. I think just the raw possibility of point production here is worth rostering.
So the two guys I'm interested here, Tobias Harris, just at 8K, you're not really getting any break for the volatility. And I get it that he can be the second leading scorer. He could also be the fourth on any given night. So frustrating to see the up and down with it. And then there's the brother versus brother narrative. If you're buying into Seth doing everything he can to outshine Steph.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's going to be a lot.
I should have pulled up if there's any stats in the brother versus brother matchup. I'm sure somebody's got the a good line on the head-to-head. But as like a raw play for fantasy point upside, Seth he's always fine to mix in, but I haven't really since the beginning of the season. I was getting to him a decent amount at the outset because I thought there would be a lot for him to do. I thought he'd be making a lot of shots and seeing around he's at a 0.74 for this season. I was thinking of him more in terms of like a 0.85, a 0.9 per minute kind of a performer. I thought he'd step it up a little bit, and he hasn't really. So he's only coming up under 5% optimal and efficiently owned on FanDuel, 2% optimal, but nobody on him on DK because he costs 5,800 over there. If you want to spend that on him, you're going to be on an island unto yourself. And if Seth Curry goes out and has one of these nights where he makes 8 or 9 threes and is just trying to match his brother, you're going to be very happy to have had him in your roster with nobody else on him. It's just, it doesn't seem all that likely that he's going to come out and do that. So it's not a play for me. It's a tournament mix and match kind of a play, dart throw kind of a play, but it's not one I'm going out of the way for. And Tobias, like you said, he's just kind of flat. He is who he is. He's priced how he is. He's owned how he is. So nothing exciting for him. He's fine to take some shares of.
He's the Rocky statue of DFS players. All right, so one more game to get to. Hit that thumbs up button, please, if you haven't already. Greg and Matt coming your way in about 6 minutes for Live Before Lock, taking you up to this slate at 7 o'clock. All 6 games, of course, they'll cover our final game here. But before that, I won't even let the chat or the poll or anything sway you. It's on you. The number one movie you think of from Philadelphia. There's no wrong answer from Terry McBride here.
Man, I had started leaning into the other game. The only one that's leaping to mind. Oh, no, never mind. 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys is my answer.
Oh, what an underrated. I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah,
underrated shout. Yeah.
Terry Gilliam, underrated filmmaker, underrated pop culture contributor. He was a member of Monty Python, and he's made some amazing, amazing movies. If you're not familiar with Terry Gilliam, go check him out.
There you have it. All right. See, I knew you would give us something to think about, just like you are with Jokic. We talked about Embiid. Same thing, open-ended question with Jokic and how much you're getting to him compared to the field.
Yeah, I mentioned him off the top. He's my favorite play on the slate. 1.68 fantasy points per minute over the course of the season. Right on that average for over the last 3. Gave us almost a 60-point FanDuel night in 35 minutes the other night. Certainly capable of doing that anytime. The 1.68 is up from the 1.58 that he gave us in his MVP winning season last year. So he's doing more. He's just so good. Such a big performer. At 11-2, it's weird to say that might be a little bit low on FanDuel, but I think it probably is. So I'm really aggressively getting the shares of him there. The field's on him. He's almost 30% owned over there, around the same optimal rate. I just don't care. He was coming up something like across 500 and change lineups that were off the top optimals. He was coming up like 97% of them on FanDuel. So I won't necessarily be there after, mixing and matching and sorting and everything, but I will be aggressively ahead of the field on Jokic shares here. I think he's a spectacular play.
By the way, the boss weighing in. How is everybody not saying Rocky as the number one movie? Good thing he missed my rant. Otherwise, I think this might be my last deeper dive.
Yeah, that was 12 Monkeys with the caveat that Rocky was taken off the board by our dictatorial host here. For me, that would have firmly been Rocky, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, I gave you the first one was a piece of art.
Yeah.
I gave you
absolutely. We agreed on that. We were good. We knew where we were.
All right. Martin, we're dealing with the injury here. Let's look at anybody else you're getting to on Denver before we wrap up with the Spurs.
Yeah, I tell you what, I've been taking shares of Aaron Gordon here and there, and he remains interesting. He's performed, and he's not, at least on FanDuel, not priced up for it. 5,600, fair price to pay, coming up 16% optimal, efficiently owned, but I could get to 25% or so, 20% maybe of Aaron Gordon on that slate on a 6-gamer and not really sweat it. Over the last 3, 0.72 fantasy points per minute in 39 minutes per game, but gave us 38.7 fantasy points at a low price in 35 minutes the last time out, 0.83 for the season. Just a guy who's capable of contributing in multiple categories. So he's a dart throw. He's not somebody I'd go out of my way for, but I would take shares of him at positive leverage on the DK slate as well. I just don't love the 6,400 price. I do like the positional flexibility to both forward spots for him, though. Outside of that, nobody I'm super excited about. I would take shares of Monty Morris where I got them, at least on the FanDuel slate. He's not even looking particularly interesting on DK for 56, a little bit cheaper on FanDuel, but point guard only. I just think there are better value plays on the board than the rest of these guys.
All right. So any other value play besides, basically you mentioned the value play. Let's go to the Spurs. This is what I got, right?
Yeah, I think we can hop over to the Spurs. If we do get Barton out confirmed news, check back and listen in on the next show. You can see various guys jump into bigger minute shares, bigger roles. But like, we've got Jeff Green on Denver projected for a 28.6 minute night already and not doing anything with it. We've got Bones Highland projected at under 20 minutes, not doing a ton with it. I don't expect these guys to like vault into the most prominent roles on the slate. So I don't think it's really one we have to sweat. So on the San Antonio side, you get the usual suspect and the guy I've gone to so much this season, but he's still interesting and relevant for me. Dejante Murray up at the top of my board on FanDuel, 9,700 point guard and shooting guard eligible, 99 on DK. It takes a little bit of the glimmer off, but it's still very worth rostering. I think in spots where I'm not getting to Steph Curry as a star at the point guard spot, I might be looking to Dejante Murray. Just love what he's given us in the production this season, 1.32 fantasy points per minute. Who saw it coming? Nice season for the kids. And, really like that. Kelden Johnson's got some relevance on this slate. You could maybe squeeze a little value out of Jakob Poeltl, but he's at a more aggressive price than some of those other alternate center options that we talked about, and projected for around the same kind of production, the same kind of value. So I don't love it. I'm looking to the stars in my center shares.
Yeah, you mentioned Kelden Johnson. He's popping up on a bunch of great X-win percentages on OddsShopper compared to our projections with odds across the board, wherever you can legally bet. So I know just transferring over from projections as well, looks like it's being backed there by ownership. All right, man, I think we slammed everything in there. Is there a movie that comes to mind and said it 8 seconds? Toy Soldiers? How about Jackie Chan, The Big Brawl? That's from San Antonio.
Right. That's a good one. Toy Soldiers is a solid one too. I wouldn't have thought that was filmed in San Antonio.
But Nature Calls also filmed in San Antonio.
Ace Ventura?
Yeah, underrated sequel.
Okay. Yeah, not a bad sequel. San Antonio somehow standing in for Equatorial Africa, but hey, I'll take it. That makes sense. What about the Alamo? That late '90s Alamo movie, was that actually filmed at or around the Alamo?
I couldn't even get Major League, so I'll take your word. All right. And on that note, we appreciate you rolling with us. Please make sure you hit that thumbs up button as Greg and Matt come your way right now for Live Before Lock. Tyler's still hanging around, so we appreciate him producing the show. And again, easiest way to thank us is to hit that thumbs up button if you're hanging with us, and also make sure you're subscribed here as well to the DFS channel, the season-long fantasy football channel, and our odds channel, where we have tons of new content popping up each and every day. And go to Prize Picks. They'll tell you all about it coming up as well. Go to Prize Picks, get that $100 match, get that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, Terry. See you soon, brother.
All right, bud. See you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Don't go anywhere. Live Before Lock.
Stick around. Yeah, you guys stick around. We're leaving.
It is the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock Show, sponsored by Prize Picks, and I'm pretty excited here. I get to be rejoined with my guy Matt LaMarca. It's been a couple weeks or so since we've been on a show together. Sponsored by Prize Picks, and it's a pretty interesting slate to break down. I already did the strategy show this morning, and you would think like, oh, I must have the same talking points as this morning. No, not so much, because Dillon Brooks has unexpectedly been ruled active after it wasn't expected to play today. And Jaren Jackson Jr., who was the chalk of the slate on FanDuel and fairly popular in DK as well, he is now out. So there is a lot that has changed, and I like totally different players than I like this morning. Everything I talked about earlier today is totally irrelevant, which happens from time to time. Matt, how you feeling about this slate?
Yeah, I'm good. Slate's interesting, right? We had two more Bulls end up on the health and safety protocols, including their emergency signing, who was Stanley Johnson, which I think is just hilarious. Like, you get an emergency signing because you have so much COVID, and then that guy gets COVID. So the good news for the Bulls is at least Alex Caruso will be back tonight. He might have to play 40 minutes. There's some interesting situations to dive into, Kyle Kuzma being out. We still have Rashawn Holmes out for the Kings. So it's an interesting slate.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, is you look at the situation with a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, and I knew there was going to be value on them this morning. It's just different players now that I like than the players I thought I was going to like earlier today. So definitely something that we're going to be diving into. And then also you look at the injury report now, at least as of now, it seems like we've gotten most of the pertinent information. Will Barton's questionable. That could open up some value. We've also got Rudy Gay questionable, Andre Iguodala questionable. So what? Those guys aren't going to change all that much for me. Will Barton will, but not as much the Rudy Gay and Iguodala thing. I guess we should talk about the Will Barton aspect of it, just in the interest of making sure we hit on all these injury news before we go position by position. If Will Barton ends up being out, who do you think it is from the Nuggets that's going to stand out to you the most?
Well, not to go just super chalk, but I think Jokic goes from the top stud on the slate to the super duper top stud on the slate. Right? You look at his production this season with no Barton and no Porter Jr. It's 1.81 DraftKings points per minute. So he's the guy that I think sees the biggest boost. So I would just be more interested in playing him, who's somebody that I'm already interested in playing. You could probably get a few additional minutes for, maybe a Bones Highland. Monty Morris is already kind of playing a ton of minutes. Maybe Zeke Naji works into the rotation a little bit more. So there would be some interesting players to consider. Jeff Green, I suppose, but Jokic, I think is the guy we've been playing for the Nuggets all year. He's the guy that I really would have the most interest in.
Yeah, and he's already my most exposed player. So he's nearly in all my lineups. There is no more, there's no elevated Jokic for me really, because there's enough value now on the slate that it's not all that difficult to get to him. But we'll go position by position now and kind of talk about the key points on the slate. And let's start at guard. And I want to ask you, are the players on the Memphis Grizzlies now, in talking about guards, I guess we could throw Dillon Brooks into the forward conversation, but I'm getting to more of the forwards from Memphis, and I'm actually getting to the guards, guys like Kyle Anderson, Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams in the front court, though he's a center, but guys like Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, where do you stand on them with Jaren Jackson Jr. out?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think it's more the fact that Dillon Brooks is playing is going to cramp their style a bit. Melton was somebody who looked like one of the best value plays on the slate, but now I think he gets back to, that 24-minute range as opposed to the 29, 30-minute range. And that makes him a bit pricey to me at 5,100. I do still have interest in Tyus on FanDuel. He's 5,800 over there. That's just too cheap for him. And I will have some Desmond Bane exposure as well. Bane is somebody who has actually been really good this season with Jaren Jackson Jr. off the court. With him and Ja off the court, he's 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. So I think Bane, you look at that price tag, it's definitely some sticker shock there, over $7K now on DraftKings, but I do think he still at least has some upside, even with Dillon Brooks in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable to look at it, especially now when we have, by the way, Submission, the first UFC fight of the night with 1 second left in the first round. Definitely something I'm eyeing while we're doing the show. But talking about Tyus Jones, as long as John Moran is out, there's just going to be extended minutes for him and extended playmaking duties. There just aren't other point guards to go to on the Memphis Grizzlies. You look at the depth chart for this team, and when Tyus Jones isn't on the court, who's playing point guard minutes? With all the injuries they're dealing with, Melton could play some of them, but he generally plays off ball a little bit more for this team. I guess Kyle Anderson could play backup point guard minutes, but it's pretty thin pickings. There's not that many guys to handle the ball or play make for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I do love Anderson. That's kind of like his weird skill set. He's the point forward type archetyped. And I do think he's interesting on this slate because now you can give him some backup point guard minutes. You can give him some, forward minutes in place of Jaren Jackson Jr. He's dirt cheap at 4,700 on FanDuel. So he's somebody that we'll talk about him more when we get to forward. But yeah, he's somebody that I think takes one of the biggest boosts here with no Triple J.
Yeah. By the way, just addressing something in the chat because I'm confused by it. We've got Richie Burdell here saying too much talking. What are we supposed to do? Sit here in silence? It's a show. We're going to be here. Listen, Malamark and I are going to be here for 90 minutes. We've got an hour here. We're going to be talking about FanDuel, DraftKings. We're going to be talking 30 minutes about prize picks after that and any kind of late news that breaks. We're going to go there. So you guys should be liking this video and subscribing. If you don't like us talking, what do? We could sit here in silence and it's going to be, is that going to be better maybe, but I could get undressed for you. Is that what you want? Maybe that could be what that could be what he's tuning in for.
I do a mean pigeon.
That's somewhat impressive. That's somebody who's born and raised in the New York area. That's not something that Tyler's doing. Tyler's got his duck calls. Which also Eric Lindquist in the chat. So Tyler, can you cue up the duck for us? There we go. All right. That was a little quieter than I was expecting. But either way, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit. We got 90 minutes here. All right. Other guards now. What are you doing with Dejante Murray? Because I've not played him all that much this season relative to the field at all. There's been some recent slates that have gotten to him a little bit more. But with how much I'm looking to get to Jokic today, I'm finding it a little difficult to fit Dejante Murray, and I just kind of think he's at a price point now where his upside is a little bit capped. He hasn't scored 60 plus fantasy points in a meaningful amount of time now. We have to go back
full month
to it's been a month since the 16th November since he scored over 60 fantasy points. If he scores 50, that's not going to hurt you, but I kind of feel it's around where his realistic ceiling is right now, and that's just not going to win tournaments. So I'm not really on Dejante Murray heavily. Could you talk me into him at all?
I don't think I can. I feel very similarly about him. I think at 9,900, we've kind of reached the point where you can question his ceiling, right? I think it's very possible for Murray to be a strong, value type play. He always grades out favorably in our projections, right? Because, you can realistically expect him to get to, 45-ish DraftKings points tonight, but we haven't seen that extra gear. And that's really what you need in a tournament. I would much rather pay up for some of the other guys in that price range.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about him too. And it's not so much that I think I buy into his current production at this point. It's just he's priced for it. It's appropriately priced. Let's talk about some of the chalk now at the guard position where we've got guys. Let me refresh the ownership page to make sure that it is the most recent run. But a guy who, without knowing what the exact number is, Kayla Martin. Here we go. So we got Kayla Martin right now on DK projected for 35% ownership. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 31. His ownership numbers actually come down a little bit as a result of Dillon Brooks getting ruled in and people going to Dillon Brooks. But with that said, this is a horrific price that DraftKings has made for Kayla Martin. And I think there's going to be some people that might just roster Kayla Martin because they rostered Cody Martin yesterday. Maybe they think it's the same person or something. But Cody Martin, who was massive chalk yesterday, he had a massive game. And I expect his brother to follow suit here. It's just an incorrect price relative to what we've seen from the Heat's rotation with all the injuries. They have no Jimmy Butler, no Bam Adebayo. Is there any way to get away from Kayla Martin at 3,500 on DK?
It's a terrible price tag. The only way that you get away from him is if you like Armani Brooks and, maybe Terrence Davis a little bit more. I have Brooks rated like he's my favorite value play of the day. If you look at his production the last couple of games, now you factor in no Eric Gordon. I think Brooks, I would rather spend the extra 500 and get up to him, especially considering the difference in projected ownership that we have right now, nearly 9% on DraftKings. But that doesn't mean Martin's a bad play. Like Martin's going to return value tonight, barring something crazy happening. There are just other guards, other values that I could see doing it as well. Like the Terrence Davis thing is one of the most bizarre developments in basketball recently. He's at like 1.2 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. The guy he's gone for 30 plus, I think, in 3 of his last 4 games. He's just raking. So, he's not going to play as many minutes as Martin, but why can't he do it again? He's been doing it for like a full month.
And the other thing, too, is he's gotten into some foul trouble recently and still crushing those games. So yesterday, I'll pull up his box score. If memory serves correct, Terrence Davis ended up playing 22 minutes yesterday due to foul trouble. And he scored, 22 minutes, picks up 5 personal fouls, scores 38 DraftKings points in those minutes. And DK looks at us like, should we price this guy up? Nah, we have to see more of it, which I don't even know what else they need to see at this point. So he started the last 6 games. His worst output in those games was 21 fantasy points. It was a game he got hurt and it was a blowout. He played 17 minutes. So overall, as a starter now, he's only playing 23 minutes per game and averaging 28 DraftKings points. His price on FanDuel is accurate. It's horrific on DraftKings. It makes absolutely no sense to me. And I don't get how he's not more popular. His current ownership projection we have for him is 22%. That's crazy to me. He's one of the better plays on the slate. And I do look at him as a viable pivot to Kayla Martin, but ultimately just play both of them. I think that's really the way that I'm looking to go, particularly in cash games, play both, even in tournaments, I'm overweight to both. Is there anybody outside of these two that you look at as a good pivot at the guard for cheap?
I think we can potentially look at the Chicago situation. I don't know how much Caruso plays in his first game back, but this team is just decimated right now. I mean, you've had Ayo Dosunma playing like 40 minutes a night recently, and now he's gone. So those minutes are going to have to go somewhere. I don't know if Caruso comes right back in and plays, 38, 40 minutes. I don't know if it's Troy Brown who gets the minute boost tonight, but somebody is going to have to play a ton for the Bulls. I would probably plant my flag with Caruso, and we know that Caruso can do stuff when he's on the court. He's 5K, so he's not nearly in the same ballpark as, Martin and Brooks and Davis, but I think he's a pretty interesting pivot, should command, significantly lower ownership.
All right, we do have some super chats to address here. First, from TJ Zwarich, he's saying 2v2 he's running into is Curry and Lowry versus Levine and Dejante Murray on DK for a single entry lineup. I prefer Curry and Lowry personally from this standpoint. I'm actually not really getting to Curry that much. I love his upside. It's just so infrequent that he hits it. So the way that Steph Curry's game logs work is it's a lot of games. There's like, hey, 45, 48, 46 DraftKings points for Curry, and then 86, like some absurd outlier number. But that to me is still somewhat appealing for tournaments. And I think that's an upside that Dejante Murray doesn't really have. And then I just prefer Kyle Lowry to Zach LaVine. I like Lowry quite a bit, but I'll ask you, for TJ's question, Curry and Lowry or Levine and Dejante Murray?
I think that the first one is the better like floor play, but I kind of like the second from a ceiling perspective. Not that obviously Curry can score 80 and none of these other guys can do that. He's 10 threes away from the record, by the way, tonight. He could theoretically get there, but I think Levine as the number 2 has significantly more upside than Lowry does. Even with the Heat's injuries, like Levine is just he's better. So
yeah, I'm on the same page there. Also, I mean, whatever. We don't need to reiterate the same things with Dejante Murray. Another super chat here from James Moore Jr. And we're getting a bunch of these now. Appreciate all the super chats, guys. Greg, he just said my name, but we'll include Matt in this too. Greg and Matt, who are your Greg and Matt, who are your top 2 pay up options on FanDuel, and who are your top 2 fades of the day with high ownership? All right, so let me pull up the latest FanDuel ownership, and let's start with this. Top pay up option, Nikola Jokic. Not going to get any kind of disagreements, I think, from Matt out of that one. As for a second favorite pay up option, it's kind of tough. Like, there isn't another expensive guy I'm getting to a whole bunch of. I'm kind of spread out in terms of secondary pay up options. Is there a second pay up option beyond Jokic that you really get to a lot today?
I would say that I'm overweight on Levine right now at 9,200 on FanDuel. And I'm also a little bit overweight on Joel Embiid. It's easier to do that since Embiid's ownership percentage is like 13.5% at the moment. But I have either Jokic or Embiid as my center in a lot of lineups.
I guess for FanDuel purposes, Curry at 10.5 is only 12% owned. I certainly prefer Steph Curry at 12% than Dejante Murray at 27.1%. We're basically getting a fairly similar price point between the two of them. You're just getting less than half the ownership on Steph Curry. So I'll say Jokic and Curry. Jokic is a clear number 1 pay up option to me. The second one, though, gets a little bit murky. Now, who are your top 2 fades of the day with high ownership? So we'll assume this is still a FanDuel question, although we could tie this in an answer for DK as well. So first, I'll ask you, Matt, considering the FanDuel ownership, who are your 2 least favorite plays relative to price? I will say that Dejante Murray is one of them for me.
I think Murray, I mean, the thing with Murray is, again, our projections like him as they've liked him all year. We have him under-owned relative to his optimal. I'm going to go with Kyle Lowry. We have him projected for 46+% ownership. I like Lowry. He should get us 35 fantasy points tonight, which would pay off his current salary. I don't see the upside for significantly more than that. You know, I think he 5Xs. I don't know if he can 6X or 7X. And that's really what I'm looking for. If I'm going to eat the chalk on someone, I want them to deliver humongous value. And I don't think that Lowry is that guy.
I disagree a little bit from this standpoint. Tyler Hero's coming off the bench now, and the starting lineup doesn't have Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo. And when Kyle Lowry's in the backcourt with Tyler Hero, I think that might have capped him a little bit. But now I just look at the starting lineup. It's like, who the hell else takes shots other than Kyle Lowry in the starting lineup? Like, that's one of the reasons Kayla Martin. Yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to take a lot of them, but I still think the chalk on Lowry is fairly justified. I'll say Jayshawn Tate. He's super popular on FanDuel right now at 24% projected ownership. And one thing that's happened with John Morant being out for the Memphis Grizzlies, they're still winning games. They're just doing it in different ways. Their offense is not as good now, but the defense is considerably better. And that's a lot of ownership going to Jayshawn Tate at a 6,700 price tag. So that is a piece of chalk I do not like on FanDuel, Jayshawn Tate.
I will concur with that. Jayshawn Tate is someone I have played and recommended a lot on this show, but it's never been at 24% ownership. Some of these Cleveland guys that are popping as chalky, I think you can go underweight on. I know we all love Evan Mobley. Should be the runaway rookie of the year at this moment. I don't know if I want to pay $7,500 for him. You look at his last 3 games, 31.5 minutes or less in each of them. Granted, there has been some blowout stuff going on, but you know, Mobley is a good player. I don't think he's a $7,500 FanDuel player yet. He's at 1.02 FanDuel points per minute this season. That means we need him to get to, 35 plus minutes to justify this price tag. And I don't really see that.
Yep, I think that is reasonable. I said earlier on the strategy show, I do like Mobley on DK or what is I forget which site it's FanDuel. He's 7,500. DK, he's cheaper. He's in the mid 6K range. So DK, yeah. I like the price point. FanDuel, I do think that it's a little much and he's a little bit too popular. And I love Evan Mobley. I've been on him to win Rookie of the Year and bet him before the season started. So I'm even biased towards Mobley, and even I think the 7,500 could be a little bit too steep when he's picking up this kind of ownership. If he was 10% owned or something, I would feel differently, but he's 7,500 and chalk. Another super chat here from Michael Blackson. What is your play of tonight, and what are you having for dinner? All right, who's my most rostered player today? My most rostered player is Nikola Jokic. What I'm having for dinner is that guy who told me to talk less, his mom. All right, Matt, go ahead. Matt, go ahead. What is your favorite play tonight? What are you eating for dinner?
This might be a contrarian take. I don't really eat meals like that. I eat once a day. I don't know.
Whoa.
I'm sure that's incredibly unhealthy for you, evidenced by this beautiful body that I have going on, but I work so much that I kind of just eat once a day, and that holds me over. As far as my guy, like the guy that I'm taking a stand on tonight, he's not my most owned player. He's not the guy that I think, like I will have in the most lineups, but probably the guy that I will be most overweight to the field on will be Alex Caruso. I really just think that he is a very interesting play. Like I think 40 minutes is in play for him tonight. And Caruso is a good per minute producer for his price tag. So he has the second highest leverage grade right now in the boom bust tool on DraftKings. I think he's in a great spot tonight.
All right. So while you were talking, I didn't know whether to interrupt you or not, because as soon as you started talking and we were going for a little bit there, Kayla Martin got ruled out. Kayla Martin is now no longer playing the entire slate. So we got 25 minutes into this show, right? And we think, I already said everything I talked about earlier was irrelevant. Now, everything we talked about in the first 25 minutes is once again irrelevant. So NBA DFS, the fun never stops. We've got Jaren Jackson Jr. He's doubtful to play. He's going to be a game time decision. Game time decision doesn't mean anything. It just means when the decision is going to come out. He's still doubtful. Don't sweat that at all. But let's talk about Kayla Martin now, because the Miami Heat situation now, what the hell are we doing here? Right? I assume Tyler Hero probably goes back into the starting lineup, correct?
I think unless they wanted to go with Gabe Vincent, but I think Hero is the guy that I would peg. Are you I was kind of finding Hero as somebody that I wanted to get to today, but I didn't end up getting a ton of him into my lineups. I feel like the usage has been there. You look at his game log, he has had some high usage performances, 38% 2 games ago, but it just hasn't led to any fantasy scoring. He's not making shots for the most part. He's turning the ball over a lot, and he doesn't do really anything besides score. So how are you approaching Hero? Does he get a big boost for you? I mean, you wouldn't think Caleb Martin being out would matter that much, but how are you approaching him?
So here's why it does matter to me. I'm assuming Tyler Hero starts, therefore I assume Tyler Hero gets more minutes. And his minutes have waned in recent games. He only played 28 minutes last game. The game before, he played 28 and a half minutes. If you look at his minutes per game as a starter this year, he's playing 36 minutes per game in the starting lineup. So as a result, I have to give him extended minutes. And then you also consider all the injuries here. Tyler Hero might play 38, 40 minutes in this game.
Right.
So I agree with you on the point of what does this do to his usage? Yep, probably not that much, but he's going to be on the court for another 5 minutes or so.
Good point. And I do think you can now add Gabe Vincent to that, punt guard tier. Vincent is at 0.84 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. He's 3,600. He should get into the 20s pretty comfortably on today's slate, I think, from a minute perspective.
All right. So we got some more super chats here. We got TJ Zwarch. He was saying, look at the chat. Appreciate you. I knew that Kayla Martin was out, but we had 35 minutes to go into lock, and there was no real, significant need to get to Kayla Martin. Who's at that very second. We're answering somebody's super chat, but I had it queued up to answer next. Appreciate you guys for shouting out in the chat. Joe K leaving us a super chat. This is for Greg and Matt's dinner orders. Thank you. By the way, if that's what I'm paying for what I requested my dinner order for before, that could end poorly. If that's what I'm paying for my dinner order.
It's a sting, Greg.
Yeah. Weatherman 7, a super chat. The Mom Burn deserves a super chat. Thank you. Very much appreciated. And are we all caught up on super chats now? I believe we are. All right. So now I want to circle back and ask you about Kyle Lowry. Is he? I know you weren't super high on Kyle Lowry 6 minutes ago. Does this change that at all?
I don't really think it does, right? Like, I don't think that Lowry gets a huge bump in minutes, right? He was already playing a ton of minutes, 39 in each of his last 2 games. And if anything, Hero moving into the starting lineup, as you so astutely pointed out before, it's not good for Lowry's usage rate. So I'm holding firm with my take that he is someone I'm going to be underweight on today, especially on DraftKings. He's 7,700 there. It's a lot tougher to be underweight on Lowry at 6,700 on FanDuel, but I think I'll be underweight there too.
Yeah, it's really fun. I'm updating my lineups now and just kind of trying to figure out what I want to do with some of these other Miami Heat guys. And once I rerun a set of lineups, I'll let you know what some of the results are. Initial reaction, though, I think somebody who I was not getting to at all before that I'm going to like now is Duncan Robinson. It just kind of seems inevitable that he plays some extended minutes. And this is going to be painful to bring up. What has the current ownership gotten to right now on PJ Tucker? PJ Tucker is 15% owned now, but he's nearly min price. Any interest in PJ Tucker 31? I hate to do this, right? It's terrible to do. I don't know if Joey Corman's watching this right now, but he loves himself some PJ Tucker. This guy was playing PJ Tucker when he's like 8,000 at one point. But 3,100 price tag, there's a lot of minutes to go around. Any chance if PJ Tucker makes near lineups now? He wasn't going to be for me, and I might get him in a few now.
I said the other day on one of these shows that if you're thinking about playing PJ Tucker, just unregister. I think I have to backtrack that statement now because PJ Tucker is going to see a ton of minutes and he's priced at the minimum. I still don't love his permanent production, obviously, but the guy just had 40 the other night. So clearly he has more upside than I've been giving him credit for. Like, if you just look historically at guys who are 3,100 around min price who play 30 plus minutes, they're really good values basically every single time. So yeah, I think Tucker is somebody that you want to have in your lineups. You know, I'm not saying go all in PJ Tucker. That's a disastrous outcome just waiting to happen, but he's somebody that I will certainly give a bump in my next run.
All right, I've got this updated. I'm running my lineups to see what kind of dumb things am I going to get to now in this most recent run. Let's see. Heat guys. I'm actually getting to not as much Kyle Lowry as I thought I was going to. PJ Tucker's in there, not a significant amount. I personally am getting to a decent amount of Kyle Lowry right now. Duncan Robinson is popping up at a whole bunch of my lineups now. That price point, particularly on DK at 3,500, I mean, that's just one that makes a whole lot of sense to me. And I'm also curious to see last run of ownership. We had 14% for Duncan Robinson. Let's see if we've got a fresh one, because everything is going to change now. Everything that looked one way is going to look another. And we still have Kayla Martin in the most recent one. So when we get updated ownership, I'll circle back on that and bring up some of the Heat guys. But oh boy, this was not what I was anticipating whatsoever. Anything else from the guard?
To your point, just looking at the projections now, Robinson becomes like the clear top value play on the slate. We have him now for 33 minutes, 7.45 points per dollar. Nobody else is even remotely coming close to that. So he becomes the guy that I think you want to have in the majority of your teams.
By the way, I gave Duncan Robinson just now when I was running through mine. I gave him 30 minutes, which is less than what we have up on the site. And I'm still getting to him just a ton. I slightly prefer Terrence Davis, but it's a coin flip. Both of them are really strong options, in my opinion. And other guys from the Heat that I'm getting to, I mentioned Kyle Lowry before. Yeah, I guess the price point of Tyler Hero is still a little bit prohibitive. I'm curious to see what his ownership is. I have him about 20% of my lineups right now. What do you think about, I'll ask you this. Tyler Hero or Kyle Lowry? If you could only roster one of them, which would you prefer?
It's a good question. I would probably lean Tyler Hero. I think Lowry's the better play in a vacuum, but I think that the ownership between them is going to be wider than it should. Right. I mean, we had Lowry projected for close to 40+% ownership. Right now we have him at less than that, but that'll come up. We have him at 23.5 now. I don't think that Hero sees nearly the same ownership bump as Lowry does. So I would rather roll the dice with them because I think their ceiling projections are on the similar side.
All right. And you are wrong. We just got an ownership update. Kyle Lowry projected for 45% ownership, Tyler Hero 42%.
Damn it.
So there's that's on FanDuel. Moving over to DraftKings, Kyle Lowry projected for 26% ownership. Tyler Hero projected for 22. So I'm right around the field on Tyler Hero, a little bit overweight to the field right now on Kyle Lowry. And over on FanDuel, it's a whole lot of ownership going to both of them, 45 and 42%. I think both of them just have to play massive minutes. Anybody way off the board on Miami that you would be considering now that we found out these guys are going to be really popular? Could I interest you in a Gabe Vincent or in a Max Strus?
Yeah, Vincent, yes. Strus, no, thank you.
So we've got Vincent right now projected for 5% ownership. I'm overweight on that number. Strus is not even showing up. So whatever, he's not in my lineups anyway. But yeah, I agree with you. Gabe Vincent is somebody who I'm slightly overweight to the field on. I think that he's a viable pivot option. And I think we've covered the Miami Heat situation pretty thoroughly now.
KZ Okpala?
Did I get to
those minutes in their last game? As I'm looking now,
those center minutes are the big man minutes are a disaster to project between Dedmon, Yurtseven, and KZ Okpala. I have no clue who the hell is going to play minutes in any given night. I don't have a good read on it. I don't really want to roster any of them.
I'll have some KZ just because, again, I think he's got the most upside of that trio. Big night for Team Nigeria. Team Nigeria fans. This is your night. You've got Gabe Vincent. You've got KZ Okpala. Big night coming.
This slate, I don't know how the NBA never fails to disappoint. This is the best soap opera that we've gotten. This is so, there's a lot of times where I'll be talking to my sister. I'll be like, how do you watch these dumb reality TV shows? And I realize, I'm doing the same thing just with basketball. It's the exact same thing. This is the male version of the soap opera. Let's talk about other guards now. And now that the Heat situation has been beaten to death, are there any guards that are important for you that we've not yet mentioned?
I don't even know where to start at this point. Again, I feel like this is kind of a Starsy Scrubs type slate. I mean, now you have so much value that you could potentially go with, Lowry plus Jokic, Curry plus Jokic, Murray plus Jokic, whatever you wanted to do there. I think Lonzo is someone I will have. I'll be overweight on. Right now, we have him for 15%. Again, I think the Bulls might be the team that get overlooked tonight is kind of that's my premise that I'm going on at the moment because, all this other injury value and absences, like it's all new, but it doesn't change the fact that the Bulls have like 8 guys right now.
Yeah, that's also something. So we've seen this a lot, and I was joking with this with Eric Lindquist when we were doing Live Before Lock yesterday. I said, for whatever reason this year, you get any of these weird chalk games where everybody gets rolled out. It's like auto overtime this year, and I said it kind of tongue in cheek. But then after the show's over, we're watching the Hornets Kings game together last night. That game should have gone to overtime. It was the dumbest ending of any game I've ever seen. But once again, it was one of those games where it's, hey, you get all these chalk players this year, and just overtime feels inevitable sometimes. This could be the Heat Bulls game also, where I think this should be a really competitive game. There's only a 1-point spread. Everybody's out for both these teams. It's going to be just a total who knows what's going to happen. I want to point out one other player at the guard position that we haven't talked about yet, and that's Armani Brooks. Given all of the injuries that the Houston Rockets are dealing. Oh, did you talk about him?
He was my favorite guard prior to all the stuff that just went down. I still really like him.
I don't even remember what we talked about in the first 15 minutes of the show anymore. To be honest, that's a different slate. That's not even the same slate as this slate at this point, right? Like there was players that we're talking about now who aren't even those guys, but Armani Brooks, I'm still getting to, and I liked him before. Less of a priority play though now. I've more exposure to Duncan Robinson.
I still figure to be plenty overweight on Armani Brooks. Again, like 30 plus DraftKings points back-to-back games, and that was with Eric Gordon. You take him out of the picture. I think Brooks sees more minutes, higher usage. I really like him.
All right. Let's see. Super chats. I see we have one here. Are there any more? Here we go. All right. We've got from Ribbit, who's saying thoughts on Kyle Anderson for 4,700 on FanDuel. Thanks for your service. Exactly. I serve the country and I've sacrificed hard to sit on YouTube and talk about basketball. Really sweating. That's where Matt got his camo from. Also, is right. Because when you're in the tough battlefields of the DFS world. So Kyle Anderson, we can talk about on FanDuel and DK right now. Hard for me to not like him. I understand that Dillon Brooks is back in the picture now, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is doubtful to play. We've got Brandon Clark out, John Morant out, Zaire Williams is out. By the way, just news right now, Alex Caruso will play, but he has a minutes limit. So,
all right.
It's going to circle
Brown
back
Jr.
on
it is.
Circle back on that in a minute. But first, I want to discuss the Kyle Anderson question. Yeah, I like Kyle Anderson a bunch on both sides. Given all of the guys who are out for Memphis and his cheap price point on DK and FanDuel, I think there are better value plays that have opened up now. But I think we could feel pretty confident that we're getting 24 to 28 minutes from Kyle Anderson. That's enough for him to pay off this kind of salary. Where does Kyle Anderson fit in the mix for you with all these value plays that have opened up?
I think I might even like him a little bit more than you do on FanDuel. 4,700 on FanDuel is just absurdly cheap. I mean, he paid off that price tag in his last game in like 15 minutes. So if we're going to give him 10 additional minutes today, I think, him getting into like the 30s is not outside the realm of possibility, right? Like, I think Anderson is a really nice value. We have him projected for like 25 minutes. And he should crush in that time frame. I'm a little bit less bullish on DraftKings just because there are so many guys now to consider. But again, he is grading out really well in our projections from a points per dollar perspective. So I will have some, but like as you kind of said, there are other guys that I think I'm leaning towards a little bit heavier.
Do you think that Kyle Anderson will start tonight?
Yeah, I guess so, right? I mean, it's either him or like Xavier Tillman. I think he could start at power forward.
Yeah, I think Tyus Jones, Dillon Brooks, Desmond Bane, Kyle Anderson, Steven Adams will be the starting five. If Kyle Anderson does not start, he's still going to be my player pool, but I'll get a little bit less exposure to him. Let's get back to the Alex Caruso news, which is something that matters, although wouldn't have mattered quite as much if we didn't have all this value that just opened up. But now that we have Caruso on a minutes restriction, does that create any value plays for you on the Bulls? I know you mentioned Troy Brown Jr., but do you really want to get to him because the potential opportunity cost is not being able to play as much of all the other guys we've brought up?
I do think that he's someone I will play. He's 3,100 on DraftKings. And again, like right now we have Levine, we have Vucevic, we have Lonzo, we have Caruso. And then after that, there's like nobody there, right? Troy Brown Jr. is probably going to be in their closing five. I think that he will command less ownership than some of these other punt plays. I think he's really intriguing at 3,100. I do. So he's somebody I'm going to be overweight on 100% guaranteed.
So I just gave him a couple extra minutes. I took some minutes away from Alex Caruso and I ended up getting to 15% Troy Brown on DK at his 3,100 price tag. FanDuel, I think, is a little bit less necessary with the difference in minimum salary. 15% Troy Brown. You hear that number. Is that a number you think is too much, too low, or just right?
For me, it's low. I understand your leaning. Troy Brown, 0.84 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. If you think he gets to 30 plus like we have in our projections currently, that makes him one of the better values of the day, even on a day loaded up with value plays. So, kind of jumbling it all together, the ownership, I think Troy Brown won't get as much attention as he deserves. So he's somebody I want to be, jamming in kind of wherever I can.
All right. A couple more super chats to get here. By the way, guys, thank you very much for watching. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, And this is this always happens, right? You come in with a strategy, and then it's like the old Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody has a strategy until they get punched in the face." That's every single NBA live before lock, and this one in particular. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Super chat here from DFS Reds: Mobley and Derek White, or Gobert and Kyle Anderson for DK GPP. To reread those names: Mobley and Derek White, or Gobert and Kyle Anderson.
Yeah, Derek White is somebody that I've played a lot of recently, but the salary has kind of gotten to the point now. Like it's still fair at 6,500. I think Gobert is like the guy in that group that I like the most, so I will lean the Gobert side.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any issue with that. Kyle Anderson's the guy I like the most out of those. I think he's the best points per dollar play, so that also influences me. I'll agree with you there. Another super chat from B: Bagley and Levine, or Tate and Mobley. But Mobley popping up in everybody's 2v2s on DraftKings right now. So that is Bagley and Levine, or Tate and Mobley. Bagley and Levine for me, although I don't really love either of those combinations.
Man, it feels like 100 years ago that Marvin Bagley was like one of the better value plays on the slate, right? He's somebody that I have been harping on a lot. Because Bagley, for as much hate as the guy gets, and I get why he's hated, right? He deserves it. He doesn't deserve it, but he was drafted over Luka Doncic. He's going to get hated. The guy produces when he's on the court. He's a fantasy point per minute type of dude, and he's playing with no Rashawn Holmes. So, he could end up being the forgotten man now. I think that his price tag is pretty ridiculous when you consider the amount of minutes he's been playing recently. He went for 34.5 DraftKings points over 27 minutes and change in their last game. I like the Bagley side, and he's somebody that, again, I think maybe ends up being underowned on this slate. This is like, did you ever play on Fantasy Aces back in the day?
Oh, you better believe it. I was on Fantasy Aces when the site shut down. When the site shut down, they seized everybody's funds. You better believe I'm familiar with the boom of DFS.
They used to have that format where you could leave like 10,000 in salary on the table and you would get extra points in your lineup. This would be the perfect night for that, man.
Yeah, it would be. That was actually there were some of those sites that popped up that I thought had really interesting formats and I really liked, but just all of them ultimately ended up dying out, and some of them took my money along with them when they went away. Fantasy Aces did. I forget who they got bought out by, but yeah, either way, that was something where I am familiar with that site. You know what else I'm familiar with? Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a presenting sponsor of our show. If you guys are new to Prize Picks, head on over to the site. When you're making your first deposit, use the promo code Awesemo. Get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Now, after the slate locks in 14 minutes, Matt and I are not going anywhere. We're going to be talking about Prize Picks. We'll dig into Odd Chopper, comparing some of the Odd Chopper odds that we have with some of the Prize Picks odds and trying to find some of the best props over on Prize Picks. All right. It's been a whirlwind. Let's try to hit the forward position now. I kind of feel like in whole, we've talked about the players we like the most at this point. But let's talk about Dillon Brooks now. He's priced incorrectly on DK today. He got priced down just because the assumption was that he wasn't going to play for a little bit, because he was just 7,000. Now he's down to 6,000. He's 6,100 on FanDuel. He's chalk. I think it's justified. When he's on the court, he's going to shoot a ton. There's a bunch of guys out for Memphis who's going to have to soak up a ton of minutes. To me, the only real risk here is foul trouble. As long as he's able to avoid fouling, I think Dillon Brooks is one of the better points per dollar plays on the slate. Do you think that the ownership is worthwhile, though?
I'm a little bit lukewarm on Brooks. It was one thing, like when he first came back, he was a usage monster. 38.9%, 36.4, 34.9, 31.1, 35.7. But that really kind of cooled off as he started playing more minutes. He's been at 23.5% or lower in 2 of his last 3 games. So I think if we're looking at him as this guy who is going to just shoot the ball every time he touches it, like he has been in the past, that really isn't the role that he has filled since he started playing more minutes. So I have Brooks. I'm probably a little bit underweight compared to the field at the moment, especially now that we have some of these other value plays to consider. Like for me, Duncan Robinson having lower ownership than Dillon Brooks, that should not happen.
I'm going to have an aneurysm if I see Ryan Hall Imanari roll again out of the corner of my eye. That aside, another super chat here from Weatherman7. DK GPP worth it to go down to Ball over Hero and Lowry. I already have Levine and a Miami value play in my lineup. I personally have Hero and Lowry both projected for more fantasy points than Lonzo Ball. So my preference there is Lowry. I know you felt a little bit different about them, but of the trio, if you were just picking one for a single entry lineup, Ball, Hero, Lowry, who are you picking, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree that Lowry out of those three has the highest raw point projection. So if you're not factoring in ownership, if you're just looking for the most points you need from that one spot, I would say Lowry's probably your best bet.
All right. So other forwards, I really think over the course of this show now, we've talked about everybody as players have gotten rolled out, and also a lot of them have guard eligibility. Are there any forwards that we've not mentioned that you think are pivotal plays on this slate?
I don't know how you feel about Denny Avdia now, right? He was kind of the first piece of value news that we got with Kuzma being ruled out. I thought he was interesting, right? They've announced he's going to start, and Avdia has averaged 0.84 DraftKings points per minute with Kuzma off the court this season. So he was somewhat interesting to me. I don't know if we need to go there anymore, but there's another value name if you want to throw him into the equation.
So I gave him 28 minutes, and I have him scoring less than 20 fantasy points tonight. Makes him tough to play considering all the other value options. I don't remember what my previous build was, but I think I might have had like 5 to 10% of them. And I think a lot of those shares became Troy Brown Jr. for me after we got the news about Alex Caruso playing limited minutes. So he's starting, he's cheap, but it's a brutal matchup against the Utah Jazz. And I don't really like to roster players against the Utah Jazz. There's a lot of value plays I prefer. As I'm uploading my lineups now, and hopefully everybody who's watching is gotten in some sort of semblance of lineups uploaded. Is Denny somebody who you think you're getting to with any kind of regularity in your lineups?
I have him. I think he's at around 15% for me. But again, yeah, that's gone way down with some of the other value plays that have come out. One other guy that I want to just talk real quick is Harrison Barnes. He's 5,500. We know that that's a bad price tag for him in the long term. It really just comes down to how many minutes do you think he sees tonight. He's been playing limited minutes, but as is always the case with these guys, the coach is never going to really come out and say, hey guys, tonight is the night that Harrison Barnes goes up to 34, 35, 36 minutes. So I'm going to keep playing him at that price tag. Again, it's kind of tougher to do that now with all the other options, but I think Barnes, if it is the night where he gets back to, a regular workload, he's going to provide nice value at this price tag.
All right. Do we have the forward position covered for you? If so, we could jump on over to the centers. Correct. All right, centers. I'll make this easy right now. Play Nikola Jokic. That's something that it was something a mantra of ours entering the top of the show. Like, hey, we're gonna like paying up for Nikola Jokic. We're gonna like playing Nikola Jokic. And not only has that not changed, it's become even stronger, if anything. I know you said at the top of the show we were discussing what happens if Will Barton's out, and you said you like Nikola Jokic more. Here's what's happened. We have so much value to play. Jokic is in all my lineups at this point. I find it unavoidable. It's easy to get to him. I've been projected for the gap I have between Jokic and Joel Embiid, who I've projected for the second most fantasy points today, is more than 10 fantasy points. That's the gap I see between Jokic and everybody else. How many of your lineups have Jokic in? Is he an all-in play like for you as he is for me, or just somebody you're overweight to?
I do not have 100% Jokic, but I have 100% Jokic or Embiid, and in some lineups, I think I have both of them. I'm not quite as sold on Jokic being like 10 points better than Embiid like you are. I think that there is a realistic scenario that Embiid ends up scoring Jokic. May not happen often, but I think it happens enough that I'm building that scenario into my lineup. Embiid, rough start to the year, but he's at 1.59 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. Jokic clearly better, 1.76, but we have seen the ceiling from Embiid of late. He's gone for as upwards of 75 DraftKings points. So I'm building in that contingency plan, but I totally get why you would have 100% of him. I mean, it's a strong decision.
So, by the way, because people are asking a little bit about Denny, we had a lot of Denny starts last year. They didn't go very well. Denny last year, let's see. So we had this stretch where he started for the Wizards. And I'll just read off his DK scores: 11, 13, 18, 12, 24, 20, 15, 27, 30. Okay, those are okay. 20, 28, 15, 24, 18. He largely sucked as a starter last year. He's cheap, points per dollar. He's all right. I just think there's better cheap plays today. That's what it comes down to. There's a whole lot of value at this point. As for other center options, does Steven Adams interest you at all? FanDuel would be a no for me, but on DK, especially with Jaren Jackson Jr. not expected to play, Jaren Jackson Jr. has not officially been ruled out, but he is listed as doubtful. I presume that Steven Adams plays extended minutes. They don't have very many guys to go to in the front court, and that makes him pretty appealing to me.
I do like Steven Adams. Like you said, with no Triple J, his minutes should be pretty solidified. He's already been playing about 30 minutes a night recently. He's a point per minute type of guy. I think that this is a very fair price tag for him. Would you rather Steven Adams, who we have as kind of a negatively leveraged play in our models, or Montrezl Harrell? Because that was something we didn't talk about with the Kuzma scenario. Is there any chance that they would consider playing Harrell some additional minutes at power forward as opposed to just a traditional center?
I don't think so. I'd have to look at the two-man units for the Wizards, but off the top of my head, I do not believe Gafford and Harrell have played minutes together this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to happen either, but it is something that I've been thinking about. And we have Harrell as a very positively leveraged play, only 9.3% ownership on DraftKings, but 18.5% optimal. So he's one of the highest leveraged plays on the entire slate.
Yeah, I mean, there's upside in Harrell, even just coming off the bench. I have a slightly different minutes projection than what we have on the site, though, which has me liking Harrell less. Minutes this year for Montrezl Harrell, he's played 100% of his minutes at center. He's played 0 power forward minutes.
Okay.
Could it happen? Sure. It's hard for me to project him when it's not happened at all this year, and we're 26 games into the season. So that's kind of where I stand with that. If anybody has questions in the Discord, feel free to fire those in. Matt and I will answer them. And don't forget, just because the slate locks in 4 minutes does not mean that Matt Lamarck and I are going anywhere. We're going to be sticking around. We're talking about prize picks for 30 minutes. And even if you just play on FanDuel, DraftKings, you don't play on prize picks, not a big deal, because you know what's pretty likely to happen? Late news, weird starting lineups, late scratches, and we're going to be covering that as well. So
Plus,
even
let's see if the Matt Lamarck kiss of death continues, right? So 7:00, we've got the Jazz and the Wizards starting. Typically, like whoever the guy is that I'm highest on in the first game just absolutely crashes and burns. It's a tradition unlike any other. So now that I've adjusted my Avdia exposure and I'm not nearly as high on him, stick around for the 40-point Denny Avdia explosion.
All right. Oh, Tyler from the top rope. You never know when Tyler's going to come in. And then all of a sudden we're talking about, Eric Lindquist's extracurricular escapades with ducks, and Tyler jumps in with duck noises. Now we've got the womp. Yeah, there we go. Tyler on fire from the producer seat. He really pressures Jordan to up his game. And Jordan's on vacation in Las Vegas right now, so he's not answering. But Tyler's giving him a run for his money. We'll keep it quiet so he doesn't hear. But let's get back to the center position really quick, because there are some other guys who, at least on DraftKings, were looking for a secondary center option. Jared Allen, Rudy Gobert, I think warrant a little bit of consideration. Is there anybody we've not talked about that you think could be a contrarian option at center?
I think at center, you kind of just want to eat the stud chalk at this point. Like, if you want to play two together, that's fine. I would give a lean to, Evan Mobley as my second center, as we've kind of talked about. I think that DraftKings price is too low for him. But for the most part, I'm playing Nikola Jokic. I'll have some PJ Tucker center shares probably. Like, there are not a ton of centers that I'm really interested in getting to outside of Jokic and Embiid.
Yeah, fair enough. For the most part, that's true for me. But there are still some other guys, Adams, Jared Allen, Rudy Gobert, that I have minimal amounts of exposure to. Let's see. Anything else we haven't hit on? We've got 3 minutes to go until lock. Is there anything that's popped up in your lineups that you weren't expecting until you were uploading a final version?
Let's take a peek.
While you're doing that, I'll just give out, here are my most rostered players. Actually, here's somebody I wasn't really expecting that I ended up getting to more of. With all the value that opened up, I had Darius Garland projected fairly decently. He ended up in more of my lineups than I thought he was going to. Not that I think he's some guy who at 7,800 can score 50 fantasy points. I think just there was enough value. He was the guy that fit into lineups easier that I still projected for around 40. So got to a little bit more of him than I was expecting. But here are my most rostered players at each position. Point guard, it is Kyle Lowry. At shooting guard, Duncan Robinson. Well, I guess we could say Terrence Davis there. So shooting guard, Terrence Davis. Small forward, Duncan Robinson. Power forward for me is Kyle Anderson. At center, Nikola Jokic. What is it for you, position by position?
So I have Armani Brooks at point guard. I have Duncan Robinson at shooting guard. At small forward, sorry, I'm not great with the shifting around of stuff here.
No big deal.
At small forward,
I
did end up getting to more Tyler Hero than I thought I was going to, but my most owned small forward is Dylan Brooks. At power forward, I have Kyle Anderson, and then at center, Jokic.
Yeah, so I think we see eye to eye on a lot of that stuff. We've got T McBee, our guy Terry McBride, who I believe was just on the show before us. Now he's stuck around the YouTube chat and is asking questions, but he's saying undrafted former second team All-American Devin Dotson for 22 minutes at the minimum on both sites. There's better value plays to me to get to at this point. What did I do with Devin Dotson? I gave Devin Dotson 18 minutes when I was trying to figure out what to do with the Bulls minutes when Alex Caruso ended up getting, not ruled out, but when he was announced that he was going to have a minutes restriction. To me, Dotson is just better value plays to get to. Dotson so far this year, 8 minutes per game, 5.38 DraftKings points. Last year, he scored less than a fantasy point per minute. Not enough upside for me to want to get there.
Yeah. 0.65 DraftKings points per minute this season. So I unchecked him. That's what I did.
All right. We have reached lock. So if you guys have hopefully you guys all got your lineups in. Good luck today, but don't go anywhere. Do us a favor. Stick around. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are leaving, I'm sorry that you're heading out, but still hit the like button on the way out.
Have fun tonight. It is Saturday night, you know?
Yeah, Saturday night.
Have fun, Greg.
Yeah, Saturday. It's fun. Fun is watching us talk about prize picks for 30 minutes. What are you talking about? You're out here. You've got camo on. I've got a Simpsons shirt on. What's more fun than hanging out with us? And of course, talking about prize picks. You know what's actually more fun than just listening to us talk about prize picks? Signing up over at Prize Picks using the promo code Awesemo. We get $100 bonus up to on your first deposit, and we've got a new deal going on with Prize Picks. If you guys are new to Prize Picks, sign up, use that promo code Awesemo, get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Now, all the tools that we have over at OddsShopper, that's free. You go check out OddsShopper anytime you want and find the best player props anywhere you could find in any kind of sports books, including cross-referencing that with Prize Picks. But you could also get that 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum by signing up, and there you get all the tools you need to make money on FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo, pretty much everything there is out there in DFS. We've got projections, ownership projections, everything you need to make some money. All right, Matt, do me a favor. Head on over to OddsShopper. I'm going to go to Prize Picks, and we're going to find some of the best plays that people could take over at Prize Picks. So there's a couple things that we could do here. Number one, we have fantasy point projections for Prize Picks. It's the same as FanDuel. If you guys are on Awesemo.com, you can just click on the FanDuel projections and you can compare that to some of the fantasy stats. But also we have OddsShopper, which has projection based on our basketball projections. You can see the over-unders for every single player, points, rebounds, assists, all of that. We have projections, we have expected ROI, projected odds to go over under, and that's all free to use. Just head on over to oddshopper.com. So are you over on OddsShopper right now, Matt?
Oh, I'm there, baby.
Okay. So I want you to point out, not from the game that just started. So not from the Jazz Washington game, because that's not actionable information. what are some of the top projected props for the other later games, for the 8 o'clock and 8:30 games? And we'll compare those to what we have at Prize Picks here.
So the top prop at the moment would be the over on Duncan Robinson's points. I'm not sure if that's going to be. Oh, yep, there he is.
Oh, this is okay. So I know what I have projected for Duncan Robinson. Love the over here. Duncan Robinson on Prize Picks, 10.5 points. I have him for about 14.5. Go hit on that over for Duncan Robinson on Prize Picks.
Alex has 14.6. So expected win percentage right around 74%. That's the top or one of the top win rates on the slate.
Yep, and makes a whole lot of sense. One thing that I've noticed with Prize Picks, they are a little slow to adjust for some of the injury news sometimes. And Kayla Martin being out is going to drastically impact some of the minutes here. So I'm also curious. I'm going to pull up Prize Picks. What is their fantasy point projection for Duncan Robinson? I feel like I'm going to like the over there if they have. Oh, they actually don't have a fantasy projection up. So interesting. It looks like what happened here is they took down the fantasy point projection, but they actually left up some of the props projections here. So if we're looking at the Heat guys' fantasy scores, there isn't really much to be found, but those props still up there. Duncan Robinson over 10.5. I love that call. I definitely love Duncan Robinson over 10.5. What else is looking good there?
So we have, let's see, the Spurs, Kelden Johnson. We've got the over on his rebound prop grading out extremely fairly, as well as the over on his scoring prop.
All right. Kelden Johnson. If I remember correctly, most sportsbooks have it at 5.5 for Kelden Johnson.
Yes.
PrizePicks has it a little bit higher at 6. If I remember correctly, because I was talking about this on the strategy show, I have Kelden Johnson for a little over 7 rebounds. So I still like the over on 6. What do we have the rebounds projection for Kelden Johnson? I think it's in the neighborhood of 7, if I'm not mistaken.
It's not that high, but it's 6.6. So we have an 80% expected win on 5.5. There's still plenty of wiggle room there on 6.
Yeah, so I could get behind that for sure. Over 6 makes sense for me on Kelden Johnson. Let's see. What else is there from Miami Heat players? Let me just see if there's
PJ Tucker over 7.5 points.
Let me see. So PJ Tucker, I can't do that. I have him right around 8. He's at 7.5 on Prize Picks too. It's a low number. I can't, in good faith, I can't bet an over on PJ Tucker's points because then it loses and I'll feel like the biggest idiot on the planet. PJ Tucker, here's what PJ Tucker is going to do. PJ Tucker is going to go out and play 42 minutes today and score 20 fantasy points. And it'll be fine for his DraftKings price point, but it's not going to be pretty. I think it's going to be something like 2 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, a block, and assist. We're going to get a dumb PJ Tucker stat line, but I think it might work for his DraftKings salary.
Yeah, we have the best Tucker prop on Odd Shopper, the over on his rebound prop, which is 5.5. So I just think it's funny that this is a guy we're talking about playing like 40 minutes and it's like 7.5. I don't know. It's close.
And I do slightly like the over for 5.5 rebounds. I just hate taking overs on PJ Tucker. Bias, call it whatever it is. But I don't mind the over on 5.5 rebounds, just considering the amount of minutes that he's expected to play. What do we have for the percentage chance of about Rudy Gay on track to play today? It's not going to really change anything. But PJ Tucker, what do we have as the percentage chance of hitting the over 5.5?
62% expected win.
Interesting. I mean, I don't look at it the same way. I do have it projected as the over there. I have him for 6.7 rebounds. So I assume that it would probably be, in the same neighborhood as what we have projected there. Let's look at the ownership projections. I'm curious to see if anything has changed. And I want to compare some of the fantasy point projections to the chalk players we have on the slate, because that is something I think is applicable for FanDuel and for DraftKings, is just to look at some of the chalk plays, their fantasy point projections, and see kind of where they align on Prize Picks. So for FanDuel, one of the most popular plays on the slate is going to be Kyle Anderson. What does he have on Prize Picks for fantasy score? He is not there. So we're going to skip past him. How about Jokic? Why don't we talk about Jokic? I like the over on Jokic very, very slightly. He's 56 is his over-under on Prize Picks. And what do I have? Actually, no, that's a very fair line in my opinion, 56. I take that back.
If this is just refresh my memory, this is FanDuel.
Yes, FanDuel scoring. I have him right around 56.
Yeah, I think that's fair for sure, because you're not going to get the triple-double bonus or anything like that. I think that 56 is about what I have him for as well.
All right. Let's see. Who are the other chalk players today? By the way, no new news has popped up yet. Still nothing's came. Like I said, Rudy Gay on track to play. Got Andre Iguodala. He's a game time decision. None of that matters. Who cares?
And I do have ownership from the first game. As expected, really nobody checking in with big numbers. Avdia is leading the way at a little over 12% on DraftKings. So,
as expected, Jaren Jackson Jr. has been ruled out. And I think we could have a discussion right here, just a kind of general information thing on game time decision. Game time decision, people freak out or react like, oh my God, this guy's a game time decision. Game time decision doesn't mean anything. Game time decision just means when they're going to make a decision on a player's injury status. If a guy is questionable and becomes a game time decision, he's still questionable. If a guy is probable and he's a game time decision, he's probably going to play. If somebody's listed as doubtful and they're a game time decision, they're doubtful to play, but the news is going to come out at game time. So basically what that means, the team is going to wait until a player warms up to make a decision, but it doesn't change what their actually injury listing is. So we had all afternoon, Jaren Jackson Jr. was listed as, well, not all afternoon. Ever since that last injury report update, Jaren Jackson Jr. was listed as doubtful. Just because it came out that Jaren Jackson Jr. is a game time decision, it doesn't make him any more or any less likely to play. So Jaren Jackson Jr. being ruled out, not really a surprise. That was something that was expected all around. He was doubtful, he was out. Usually when players are doubtful, they're ruled out. Every once in a while, something crazy happens. Somebody who's doubtful plays, somebody who's probable gets ruled out. In general, that's a good rule to go on. Let's see the Memphis Grizzlies guys, because I'm kind of curious to see if any of them are up on Prize Picks. Memphis players. By the way, if you like Dylan, we like Dylan Brooks today. Here's a good feeling for as to why. Prize Picks. 35.5 is the over-under they have for fantasy points on Dylan Brooks. I'm actually over that number. I don't know that I'd actually go put my money on over 35.5. I'm playing him a lot in DFS today. But just that number being 35.5, pretty good indication that we're expecting good things from Dylan Brooks at that 6,000 price tag today. Do you have any opinion on that 35.5 fantasy point over under, Matt?
I think it might be too rich for me. I mean, again, he's somebody that has been like a fantasy.
Is Matt's audio not working, or is it my headphones that are not working?
Your headphones.
Tyler's just talking, is just pointing at me. I don't know what that means. Tyler, I can't hear anything. You're just pointing. Are you pointing at me? You're pointing at? Yeah. Okay. Now I understand. All right. Why are these stupid things not working? I swear I hate technology. Let's see if I could. Let's see if I could jerry rig this and try to get it to work.
This is my opportunity to talk bad.
Did it just randomly change?
I'll never know
what my things are. Match.
Testing.
All right. Testing. So the noise is just. All right, they've been thrown in the air. They're gone. I could hear you through the actual through the actual audio on my. I think I just broke them, but they weren't working anyway. So who cares? This is, by the way, this is the second set of headphones that I've had crap out on me in the last 2 days. Yesterday, I'm doing the strategy show with Adam Schur, and my headphones just disintegrated on the show. Like one of the things just totally fell apart. A nice set of Bose noise canceling headphones. Well, there we go. I've now gone through 2 sets of headphones in 2 days. Yesterday was the Bose headphones. Today, the Beats headphones, those are gone. So,
damn, that's like $500 worth of headphones.
What can you do? This is like we said, we've been through the dirty trenches here to talk about DFS. This is not for the faint of heart. Breaking down DFS, you go through technology, none of it, which I know how it works. I'm just happy that I'm able to do this and figure out how to put basketball games and UFC fights on my side monitor at the same time. Everything else, I'm at the whim of technology and whatever the hell it decides to do. All right. And yeah, I do get that too. They're really uncomfortable. People are saying in the chat, those headphones look weird. I agree. I don't like those headphones, but I bought them and then you're kind of stuck with them, but I just broke them. So it is what it is. This is actually kind of interesting. We have E-Rush asked us over under 6.5 threes for Steph Curry on price. I agree, Justin Kelly. No, bows are good. The beats are terrible. I had a bad experience with those. They just broke. I didn't like them and I threw them in the air. I did like the bows a lot though. E-Rush over under 6.5 threes for Steph Curry on Prize Picks.
So my general philosophy is like, I am not somebody who buys narratives. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I don't buy the narrative that he's just going to launch 1 million 3-pointers tonight because he wants to break the record. He knows he's going to get the record eventually. He makes about 5.5 threes per game. So the fact that this is up to 6.5 threes, I think the narrative is driving that number up a little bit. I would take the under.
Is a really high, let me see what I have for actual threes for Steph Curry. That is a ridiculously high number. Is that really what it is? I don't usually look at the 3-pointers. Steph Curry, 6.5. That is an egregiously high number. Jeez. All right. Steph Curry. Yeah, that's an under for me. That is such a high number. I wouldn't have even thought to look at that because I don't usually check the 3-pointers. I don't check the free throws either. Eric Lindquist, if he's still listening, he loves the free throw props over on Prize Picks. But I get that Steph Curry, maybe because of the narrative, he shoots a little more. If he gets close, I'm sure there's a potential thing where the Warriors will try to set him up to get him a couple extra threes or something like that. I can't reasonably expect him to hit 7 threes in the game. That is an absurd number. 5.5 would be a pretty accurate number. If it was 5.5, would you take the over, under, or stay away?
I would stay away from it. But
yeah,
you know, he's the greatest 3-point shooter of all time. Would it shock me if he made 7, 8, 9 today? Absolutely not. But I think that his median expectation is closer to 6, and we're not getting the win with 6. So it's a pass at that number.
Got a super chat here from Edmund Deravakian saying, get yourself a nice pair of gaming headphones. They'll last forever. Good luck tonight. Edmund, I appreciate you. Trust me, I'll figure a way to break everything. And it's not even because the headphones could be shit. It's the user, the operator. Everything I own is operator errors. I used to have golf clubs. The golf clubs didn't work. They didn't always hit the ball straight. It happens. It's always operator errors.
We have time for a quick anecdote.
Yeah, go ahead.
I used to play the saxophone, as a lot of the chat knows.
Cool sax, Matt.
Saxy. My uncle was my music teacher. And there would oftentimes be like something I would complain about, like, oh, my reed's not working or this keys. And he would always just say, sounds like it's the loose nut behind the mouthpiece, meaning me. So
it's the exact same thing. I don't know what it is I do to headphones. I think part of it too is technology. So I have in front of me right here. Here's what I have this app in front of me. I have a computer I use just for streaming. I have a computer I use just for building lineups. I have a monitor over here that I use to stream whatever sports are on. So I've got UFC on right now. I'll go split screen and have NBA on it. Then I also have my phone, which I use to check for Discord questions. And then I have my iPad that I use just to mess around on when I'm in the middle of, when we're in the middle of shows and I need to look stuff up. So I have all that stuff in front of me. I never turn any of it off though. And I think that is something that probably makes it so that my technology burns out a little faster. It just stays on 24 hours a day, which I'm sure isn't ideal whatsoever. Let's check in with the live scores here. Only one game going on. Wizards, Utah Jazz. Big performers so far. Matt, who do you think it is?
Donovan Mitchell.
Oh my God. I thought you'd be able to get this just based on your curse.
Oh, Denny? Is Denny doing stuff?
I mean, not really. He's got 2 points and 3 rebounds, but the game's 6-6. There's not been a lot of points scored, but Denny's the guy so far. 2 points and 3 rebounds. The people who were excited about Denny in the chat before, who were telling me that I was an idiot, they're looking better than me so far. But still, once again, 2 points, 3 rebounds for Denny. We'll see. We'll see how all this goes. Let's get back to prize. Oh, what was that?
I said, give him hell, Denny.
Give him hell. Let me see. What is my actual exposure to Denny? Yeah, I end up with 0% Denny. So I would be, if he scores 20, 25 fantasy points, I don't care. 30 plus from Denny, I'll be a little agitated. And if Denny scores 30 plus fantasy points, I'll buy another pair of headphones and break them before I even open it out of the thing. Because that's
dangerous.
That's what you should.
There's a legit range where that happens.
That's what you should do when you lose money is you buy something expensive and break it before opening. But that's what's going to be on the line today. As for, let's get back to Prize Picks once again, guys. If you guys are new to Prize Picks, head on over to the site, sign up using the promo code Awesemo, get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Matt, go back over to Odd Shopper for me.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, read off some of the other best props of the night that we've not talked about yet.
All right, here's one. It's an under. A guy that we didn't really talk about on the show, but we have Nikola Vucevic under 18.5 points.
Nikola Vucevic. You know, I liked Vucevic early in the day as a contrarian option. I ultimately didn't end up having to get to him because I got to so much Jokic. What's that number? He said 18.5?
Yes.
It's a stay away for me. I have him projected a little bit under, but I always struggle with this. So when you're making projections, there's an assumption about how good the opponent's defense is. When a player gets ruled out, it's really easy to find out who from their team benefits. You know, no Bam Adebayo, no Jimmy Butler, no Kayla Martin for you just figure out like, okay, here's how the usage gets allocated. Here's how the minutes get allocated. You could pretty easily find out who's a good points per dollar play. I always struggle trying to figure out how that impacts the other team. The Miami defense is clearly worse without Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. But just based on how I'm building projections, like there's not a way to automate what the difference is in defensive matchup. So I have Vucevic a little bit under that number. I don't feel confident in it because he gets dragged down under the assumption that he'd have a good defense. Does that all make sense to you? I just never really know how to project those scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Awesemo has him projected well below 18.5. We have him at 16.1. So we have a pretty good expected win on that. I like to lean on the Vegas totals when we're talking about like, how does that impact, right? This game had a 208.5 total. So it was a weird spot where from just a raw scoring perspective, this is quite possibly the worst game on the slate. But there was just a ton of value on both sides. So I think it's fine to be underweight or, to have a lower projection for a guy like Nikola Vucevic, even with some of the injuries and stuff that both sides are dealing with.
Yeah, it's did you end up getting to any lineups with Vucevic for DFS?
0 Vooch.
Yeah, same. I'm going to feel dumb if he goes off. I've him in a bunch of best ball teams, so at least I'll be happy with that. But early in the day, I did like him quite a bit as a contrarian option. By the way, Denny, since the last update I gave on him, has scored 0 fantasy points. He has we've talked Denny into playing poorly again. He has started to. Oh nope, he just hit a bucket, but he's at.
Let's go, Denny.
4 points and 3 rebounds now, halfway through the first quarter. All right.
It's like 3x value already.
Yeah, who cares? There's a lot of other value on the slate. It's going to depend how many minutes he plays. If it's going to be a thing where Denny just ends up going to play, I don't know. If Denny ends up playing 40 minutes, something egregious, then he's just going to end up being pretty good. But my assumption is that Denny doesn't play all the many minutes, but we'll see. People on pace for 61 points. What do you think? He's playing 48 minutes?
Here's a good one. 2 guys that you have talked up. We've both kind of talked up over on Prize Picks. Kyle Lowry, 37 fantasy points. Tyler Hero, 32 fantasy points. If you had to pick one of those to go either over or under, do you have a lean?
All right. So Hero 32, Lowry 37.
Yes.
I have the over fairly significantly on both of those. But if I had to pick an over, it's clearly Tyler Hero over 32 fantasy points. That's a really low number. We haven't gotten a Heat starting lineup yet, which is a little curious. That game starts in 38 minutes. Miami Heat starting lineup would be useful. Do you think they're going to do something weird?
No, I think you had the lineup pegged. I think it's going to be Lowry, Hero, Duncan Rob,
PJ Tucker, Dwayne
Dedmon. Exactly. Yes.
If Tyler Hero doesn't start, because they've shown a little bit of hesitancy to start in recent games, they've gone with Martin over him. Who do you think would be the guy that Miami, and by the way, I don't think this is going to be the case, but let's say they decide to bring Tyler Hero off the bench. They like him in the 6-man role. Who do you think would start in place of Tyler Hero, in place of Tyler Hero instead?
I would say Vincent in that situation, maybe Max Struss, but I would say Vincent, if not Hero.
Vincent has made one start this year. He played 25 minutes and scored 8 DraftKings points. Who was out that day? Lowry was out. Kayla Martin was out. Yeah, so it was Lowry and Martin were out, and they ended up starting Vincent. He did not do anything. 25 minutes, 8.75 fantasy points. How about you? Lowry or Hero? Which of those numbers would you prefer?
I'm with you. I would take the Hero over, but I think, like you said, both guys probably deserve over consideration. I just feel, the lower number with Hero, I think it's obviously a little easier to accomplish.
You've got good news for us. Are you ready?
Yeah.
First commercial break. Denny checks out. So he came out 5 minutes into the first quarter.
All right. Keep him fresh. He'll captain the second unit.
Yeah. So at least based on that, I mean, it looks like we're probably going to be getting, 24, 26 minutes out of Denny. I think we're safe. I think people seem to enjoy
Don't
watching
lump me
in.
in. I ended up overweight on Denny at 12%. I have him at 15. So
fair enough. I think people enjoy watching me tilt Denny though. So I'll just keep bringing it up when it's never actually necessary, but I always want to go back to Denny. All right. What else is going on in this game? Donovan Mitchell, 10 points for Donovan Mitchell, 3 of 4 from the field so 5 minutes, 10 points for Donovan Mitchell. Didn't play him today. I didn't really play anybody from the Utah-Washington game, and it was kind of twofold. Number one, I just thought it was a fairly weak game to target, but then number two, I didn't know what's going to happen with these starting lineups. I just want flexibility to be able to swap in case anybody gets late scratch or there's a weird starting lineup. I want as much flexibility to be able to maneuver my lineups as possible. If something happens like Tyler Hero isn't starting, that's going to change all my lineups. Kyle Lowry starts to look better. Tyler Hero obviously looks worse. Then there's going to be another value play, potentially Gabe Vincent introduced for the Miami Heat. So I really wanted to have that kind of flexibility. And so as much as I'm making fun of Denny here, I'd rather play potentially not Denny than actually play Denny if it's somebody who's going to be.
It's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because the opportunity cost of locking up a slot in a game that starts an hour before all the other games on the slate is something to consider. So that's like that next level DFS thinking right there that I think the good players think about all the time and some of the more amateur players never think about.
JaVale McGee last night. JaVale McGee ended up being a key part of the slate and had a big game, and not a lot of people played him. We've got, by the way, number one guy getting at me, Marshall White. By the way, I love when people come at me. Marshall White, Denny will have 97 fantasy points today. Matt, if we had this number on Prize Picks, Denny Avdia over under 97 fantasy points as of right now, would you be taking the over or the under on that number?
I'd take the under on 97, but it's close. I have him for 94.5 right now.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad way to look at it. I think that would be so. There's a couple different ways you could build out your player props on Prize Picks. There's the flex play or the power play. The power play is the one you're most confident in. I'm gonna pivot here. I would confidently put the 5x, the power play, on the over 97 fantasy points for Denny. Maybe a little bit of leverage off my fantasy lineups. Right? Is that the proper way to hedge, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you're joking, but I do kind of do that from time to time. Like if there's a chalk DFS play that I don't want exposure to, or that I'm underweight on, like I will get exposure in the prop market. Yeah,
the Denny, not much of an opportunity for a middle there or anything like that, though. If I've zeroed Denny, then I have the over 97 fantasy points. It would be so disappointing if he has 90. It's like, oh no, I lost my bet and all my DFS lineups are dead. I would love to get a starting lineup for some of these teams that we could react to, but At the moment, it looks like we're just not going to get that before the show ends. Let's go back to Prize Picks, Matt. Throw another one at me. Tell me what else projects well. We'll compare some of the props here. Nothing starts at 7:30. We've got 33 minutes till the next slate of games. Plenty of time for guys to go over to Prize Picks. Sign up using that promo code Awesemo. Get your $100 deposit bonus. Play some of these props together. What else are numbers that look pretty good over on Odd Chopper?
So here's another one that kind of fits what we were just talking about, right? Like neither of us ended up with a ton of Dejante Murray, but we have the over on his rebound prop grading out as one of the better bets on the slate. So to me, that would be a way to, build some Murray exposure into my portfolio while still being underweight on DFS.
The number on Prize Picks is 7.5. Is that the same number that's up on? I like I do slightly like the over for 7.5. Is that the number that's up at books too?
We have 8.5 projected, so that's good for a expected win rate of 68%.
Yeah, so I could get behind that if you're throwing in some Prize Picks cards here, getting to the over 7.5 for Dejante Murray. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. As for other numbers, I'm kind of curious to look at what they have for Joel Embiid here. Joel Embiid fantasy points, 48. That seems pretty low to me. 48 fantasy points for Joel Embiid. I haven't projected over that number. I have Jokic for around 60, but Joel Embiid, I still have close to 50.
Yeah, I would say I would take the over on 48.
He finally looks healthy again.
Yes,
right.
The usage is back. The minutes are there.
So I think early in the season we were looking at for Joel Embiid, it was a couple of things. He had the COVID situation. Also, he just didn't come into the year healthy. Probably shouldn't have been playing at the start of the year. He was playing limited minutes sometimes. The usage was down. In a weird way, I almost think COVID helped him. And just because I think he needed to rest the knee. And I don't think the Sixers ever would have rested him if it wasn't for that. And I think they were just forced to. I think he would have gone the whole season with a bad knee. And I think that time off really helped his knee in a way that he wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. So long story short, give me over 48 fantasy points for Joel Embiid. Final question. I'll answer this from Marshall White. He's been a good sport, giving us a little crap about Denny Avdia. So he's asking us, Xavier Tillman, FanDuel, I want to play starter or not. I personally would only play Tillman if he starts. I think it's possible he does, but I'm not really dying to play Tillman if he comes off the bench. How about you?
I do think the Grizzlies are a team that are interesting, right? Great matchup against the Rockets. So I don't think Tillman's a terrible play, but again, you'd want him to be in the starting lineup.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for sticking around and watching. You guys got an hour and a half. I know that one guy was disappointed that we were talking during the show, but what could you do? It happens over the course of 90 minutes. But we appreciate you guys. Do us a favor. Hit the like, subscribe to the YouTube channel on the way out. Good luck. Have a good night.